We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And as a Canadian who does not live in Toronto, that was a very fun first round playoff result. Okay. So obviously, I
don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, obviously,
I
watch
actually saw
hockey.
the Rays game this weekend because I was at my brother-in-law's house.
Okay. Yes. No, obviously I watch hockey because I'm a Canadian, and a lot of people outside of Canada might not know the relationship that everywhere outside of Toronto has with Toronto, which is that if you're not from Toronto, you kind of root against Toronto no matter what. So, yeah, it was very, very humorous. And I mean, because the Montreal Canadiens are basically Canada's team. Even if you're not from Montreal, you root for the Canadiens. So, yes, watching them come back from a 3-1 deficit in the series to win the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, that was very amusing for someone on the West Coast. So there you go. That was fun.
Well, that's kind of when I was in Australia, it was kind of like that. It was like you rooted for Australia unless there wasn't anybody left from Australia, and then you rooted against the UK.
Okay.
Basically.
All right.
Like, you didn't care who won as long as it wasn't one of the Palms. So,
yes. And anyone from really Toronto area who's listening, you know, if there's no surprises, we're all rooting against you.
Right. It's okay.
Oh man, they've tried so hard.
It's all fun. All fun and games. Oh, there goes the camera.
There we go. It is AVRant. If you're on YouTube,
Mike.
Yep, there you go. It had to happen.
Hey, Mike.
That came back quicker than normal.
I
don't know if my internet connection is going to hold out. My ISP shoved an update to everybody's Wi-Fi routers, and it has been a mess ever since. So I think it's working. I seem to be stuck at 2.4 gigahertz speeds, but that should be enough for a Skype call, crossing my fingers. So here we go.
All right. Well, technical glitches aside.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Mm-hmm. So Rob's got a fan on. I am drinking soda instead of coffee because we ran out of coffee. We have plenty of it. I just didn't make any more. I didn't have time to make any more before this. So you might hear some clicking of ice and some pouring and sizzling or whatever.
I'll be denoising my recording, so it shouldn't be noisy in the background, but we'll see how
I won't be denoising anything. So because I can't be bothered. But yes, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrant podcast, youtube.com/avrant. You can contact us directly, Rob at avrant.com. Twitter is @firstreflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. So let's talk about our listeners of the week. Become a listener of the week. You support the podcast in some way. If you want to do that financially, you can go to patreon.com/AVRant Podcast, where you can become a ongoing, subscribing, contributing supporter of the podcast. So I'm going to just keep adding words to that.
That is the full title. Nothing else is acceptable.
Nothing else is acceptable. So that's every month Patreon takes some money from you and give most of it to us. So we want to thank our 126 patrons over at patreon.com, including Bertrand.
Yes, we sure do. Patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. For anyone who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, big thanks to our 126 patrons holding steady at that number for the second week in a row. And thank you, Bertrand, for being one of them.
Thank you. If you can't support us financially, we understand. Just let us know, support us in some way, and let us know what you did to support us, and we will mention you. So Carl and Brandon are both JVC projector owners, so they weighed in on Gurinder's questions about the noises his JVC makes when it powers up. Carl and Brandon both say there are some quiet noises when the iris, from the iris when it's starting up, but the noises in Gurinder's video are louder and don't sound quite right. They agree with Ara from last week.
Yes. So very happy to have more opinions weigh in, more JVC projector owners. Carl has owned multiple projector models across the past 10 years or so, and he's like, yeah, they kind of always sound like that. There's always some little noise, but that video was not quite right. So good to have additional opinions on that, and thank you.
Preston talked us up to HSU and Mini DSP when he bought products from them. He's also a 2 hour plus club member, which means he's listened to the whole podcast all the way through to the end, and just to see if one of those rare occasions when we might leave something after the music at the end. And he wants to invite all the other 2 hour plus club members who are of legal drinking age to join him in the drinking game he created while listening to our podcast. So he's got 16 rules. You take a shot anytime one of them happens. We'll post the full list in the show notes, but a couple of fun examples surround back speakers get bullied, Rob's Canadian accent comes through, and Rooter counts as far as I'm concerned.
Sorry, I have no idea what you're talking about.
He just said it again. It's so hilarious. Someone's dream of buying an external amp to get squashed, and Tom said, the one I liked best was Tom shares some random personal fact about himself.
That's right.
Like he likes the color yellow.
Yes,
so,
something that after how many years have you been doing this podcast?
13 years.
13 years. So after 13 years, that somebody still doesn't know. Which there you go. Always something new to learn in the onion that is Tom.
And that's why we release on Fridays, so that you guys can come home from work. You can sit back with a cup of scotch and a bottle right next to you, because you're probably going to need it. Because I'm definitely going to talk about somebody not getting an amplifier.
Okay.
Or tower speakers or something. So, and then just relax. And then next morning, you can wonder what happened.
That's right.
You have to. So that's fun. Thank you, Preston. Jack mentioned this to Outlaw Audio when he bought a Model 5000X amp. Accessories for Less, he mentioned us to them too when he bought a Marantz SR6014. B&H when he bought Peerless Projector Mount, and Herb over at Cross Spectrum Labs when he bought an individually calibrated U-Mic 1. So thank you, Jack.
Yes,
he
indeed.
Did the rounds.
Yes, I didn't mention Preston, so thank you, Preston. That drinking game does sound very fun. And Jack, thank you for talking us up to Outlaw, Accessories for Less, B&H, and Cross Spectrum Labs. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Rob says it sounds like fun. Rob doesn't drink. Don't worry, Rob. I'll drink enough for both of us. We'll be fine.
You know what? I had a Tom Collins 3 weeks ago or something.
I literally do not know what goes in the Tom Collins. I don't know anything about it.
Super simple. I mean, it's just a gin sour minus the egg. So.
Like, none of those words make any sense to me. First of all, I don't drink gin because it tastes like old socks.
Really?
Number one.
Like gin. That's the only alcohol I like is gin. It's the only one.
Oh my God. It literally smells like old socks to me.
Okay, you know what?
It walk into my 17-year-old son's room. I'm like, he's been drinking gin, or he's got a bunch of socks in here.
Make a fizzy lemonade and put some gin in it. That's a Tom Collins.
Okay. Egg, though? There's
no,
eggs
in a sour there is. Well, in a silver sour. But
I started drinking old fashioned, and I think I'm all sophisticated now. So,
see, a lot of restaurants everybody knows a Collins glass, right? You've certainly heard of a Collins glass.
Yes, I know what a Collins glass is. Yeah.
So everybody does know, they've heard of a Collins, but a lot of restaurants don't serve a Tom Collins anymore. It's too old of a drink or something, I guess. But most places know how to make a sour. So if they don't know a Tom Collins, I'm like, okay, just make me a sour, put it on ice, and don't put an egg in it. And then you got a Tom Collins.
If I was your waiter, I'd be like, I think he's just messing with me, right? Is he messing with me? I think he's messing with me.
People, a whiskey sour, right?
I mean, I know they exist.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a wide repertoire. Like, I drink beer. I used to drink a lot of wine, but then I got my acid reflex. And then I rum and cokes. That's what I drink. That's what I've drunk my whole life.
Well, how about a gin and tonic? That's my other only drink I'll ever drink is a gin and tonic.
I'm like a baby drinker. Sure. I just, I mean, I never got into all the sophisticated. I did martinis and Gibsons and gimlets and stuff like that. But
my drinks have really 2 or 3 ingredients at most. That's not, unless you count ice. I don't think ice counts as an ingredient.
Well, around here they seem to think it does because they charge you extra for the good ice.
Anyway, thank you, Preston. Thank you, Jack.
Yeah. Jack also sent some photos for me to use with permission to use them on AV Gadgets, which is great. I will maybe do that. I don't remember what they look like, so we'll see. Let's see here. We got a shout out from Rob to everyone who's given a view and a like to his niece's hand-drawn animations on YouTube. They're frenetic.
Well, I mean, there are miraculous girl transformations, yeah. The cartoon Miraculous.
Yeah, they're very, and she's how old?
9.
Can you share that?
Yeah, she's
9. So you look at this and you're like, I couldn't do it. So
I couldn't do it. There's no way.
Do it. She's very. I mean, this is great.
Yeah.
I think this is great. So I'm happy to support everybody who listens to this podcast. Needs to go and subscribe to her channel. You don't ever have to watch anything. Just subscribe.
The animations are 13 and 17 seconds long. It will not blow your day.
Well, not. Yeah, you won't. You won't. There's no drinking game involved with it, except just keep drinking until the end.
Yes,
that's the drinking.
One
game.
long sip. See how much you can get into your gullet there. Slow the speed down on YouTube if you want more.
Yeah, really. If you're trying to drink a beer. All right. We got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Jason Lance, who says we're interesting, informative, and funny all at once.
Yay.
Funny looking, maybe. He's glad Tom likes the golden yellow color of his walls, which I probably... Oh, there goes the camera. Hi, Mike.
I was wondering what was going on. Something went weird on that camera.
Hi, Mike. I'm back. And he was shocked, he says, to hear Rob pointing out that Lance's PC12 Plus subs are better than Tom's PC12 NSDs. Out of line.
Yes, what? That was the quote. I'm out of line.
Oh, whatever.
How dare I tease Tom about anything?
Oh, please.
Obviously, he was joking.
So Preston also said something. Chris asks who wouldn't listen to full 2 hours every week. Bertrand Jonathan says Jurassic Park is his favorite movie too. Saw it 6 times in the theaters. I definitely saw The Crow more than that. I think I saw The Crow 6 times in a week.
Nice.
When it was out. There was a theater I used to go to that was like $5. And it was a great theater with a lot of sound, and I saw it so many times. Michael and a different Chris also says we had Jason Lance, Preston, Chris, Bertrand, Jonathan, Michael, and a different Chris all gave us notes of gratitude. So thank you, gentlemen.
That is right. I'll say the names once more. Jason, Lance, Preston, Chris, Bertrand, Jonathan, Michael, and Chris. Thank you all very much for those notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. Notes of encouragement are greatly appreciated right now. And thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
Yes. So in the news now, Sound United announced how owners of their flagship Denon X8500HA receiver and Marantz AV8805 Pre-Pros, which were released in 2018, if I remember correctly, can get them upgraded to add HDMI 2.1. Mm-hmm. You will have to pay $600 and send it to an authorized repair center to have the current HDMI 2.0 board replaced with a new HDMI 2.1 board, which... in a baffling decision, still has a single HDMI 2.1 input.
A single HDMI 2.1 input. 2 outputs, but 1 input. Yes.
So at least that single input already supports the 4K 120 and presumably the 8K 60. Yes. And all the other inputs, all the HDMI 2.0 ones, will support HDR 10 Plus and VRR. Upgrades will begin June 15th. So you got like pseudo 2.1 across the board for most of the stuff.
Right.
But if you want to get the maximum stuff, if you have an Xbox, I mean, you still have to choose which one you're going to
Yes, only one.
Right?
It's only one console or one computer with a modern graphics card can get plugged in.
Yeah. So as for buying a new one, if you decided to buy an X8500H or the AV8805, those will gradually be replaced by new X80. Okay, let me try again. X8500HA and AV8805A.
Yes.
So the A is the...
We've got the HDMI 2.1 board on.
I don't know.
That's what the A
it doesn't make any sense. But anyways, so they will already be upgraded. The versions will cost... These new versions will cost $300 more than the list price for... So we don't know what they'll actually cost when you get them. But so it's $4,300 for the receiver from Denon, the X8500HA, and... I guess it currently says $4,500.
Yeah, it was supposed to be $4,300, but if on the website at the time we're recording this, it says $4,500. So whatever, it's going to be more than the $4,000 of the X8500H.
The press release said $300.
Yes,
premium for both of them. So it's $4,800 for the AV8805A.
Right.
So if you haven't bought one and you really want to buy one, you're going to wait.
Yes.
I have already read reports from retailers who are saying that they have already started sending stuff back to get it upgraded. And I've read reports of that's in progress. So I think by June 15th, when you can start trading in the ones you have, you will also have at least the possibility of getting a brand new one that has the upgraded board. That being said, I still wouldn't buy it.
Not when there's only one.
I just don't understand why you would buy something that has one HDMI 2.1 input that's fully functional. I just can't fathom.
I sure hope
why
that
you would
this
do it.
isn't like showing us what the 2021 lineup from Denon and Marantz is going to be. I hope that the new models, whenever they come out, are going to have more than one input. I don't know.
I just don't know how they got into this situation. I feel like they contracted with somebody and said, this is the only board we can give you, or they bought like I know that's not how it works, but I kind of feel like, you know, they just got like backed into a corner somehow. They're like, this is all we got. This is all we can sell people. And I just can't fathom how they're not doing more. At least two. I mean, at least two, the two consoles that are out there. But, you know, I mean, the Olympics are, I don't know if they're going to happen or not. No one knows. They're still talking about it. But they're supposed to, you know, have 8K streams of that.
That's right.
I mean, I don't know if they'll ever make it to the United States or if they'll just be sitting in South Korea. But it's theoretically possible.
Right.
And wouldn't you want to be able to see 8K Olympics? Because I know I would. Oh, hey, Mike.
Man, we normally don't get this many camera glitches, but there it goes again. Yeah, I mean, the thing was, when people bought the X8500H, particularly if they bought it in, say, 2019, when we knew that HDMI 2.1 was on the way, people were like, okay, this is I think at the time it was about $4,500. The price has come down over time. But, you know, people were saying, okay, if I'm going to potentially pay this much, I don't expect to pay that again in 1 or 2 years when HDMI 2.1 is here. So people asked Sound United, like, will there be a way to get HDMI 2.1 on what is your flagship receiver in pre-pro? And they're like, yep, we have a plan in place. It will, like, they didn't try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. They said back then it will probably be a hardware upgrade that requires you to send it in. That made perfect sense. But I wasn't expecting them to, first of all, wait to sort out the 4K 120 issues. That is important. I'm glad they did that much, but I didn't expect them to wait and then still only have one. But that's just, that's kneecapping themselves. So,
yeah, you know, I really feel like if they had the ability to give you more, they would give you more.
It seems
you know
like, yeah. Well, I mean, how Yamaha did it, you know, although Yamaha hasn't actually done it yet because the promised firmware to activate the 4K 120 never happened. So
on AV Gadgets, I just got a comment today from somebody who said that he got his upgrade box already.
Yes,
from Denon.
Yeah,
and he said that it was working fine.
Yeah, the one
like
input,
I don't know if
output.
I don't know if he's, you know, if he's using 4K 120 or anything like that, but he says it was working fine. I assume it's a he. I don't know. I didn't really look. Whatever. Okay, so that's that.
That's that.
Some comments here from listeners. Jack, if you're looking to decouple your subwoofer or speakers and you want to cut something so that's exactly the right side, he recommends a neoprene sponge rubber mat.
Yes.
Which is, I'm going to click on it because I want to know what it is. But
all right,
let me see here.
They call it a camping mat, so I guess it's the idea that this is one of those things you can take with you, and you know, it's not an air mattress, but it gives you a little bit of.
Double it up a couple of times depending on the weight of your subwoofer. But yeah, it's like a yoga mat, a thick yoga mat.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, so that'd be fun.
That'd work. That's fine. Anything squishy that isn't so squishy that it gets compressed.
I wanna. How much does that thing cost?
It's like $20, I think, or something.
Yeah, that's pretty cheap.
Yeah,
that's pretty cheap.
And it's like
the other thing,
6 feet long. So
yeah, the other thing I suggested on my AV Gadgets article about decoupling your subwoofers are these pads that are meant to go underneath like industrial washing machines.
Right.
I mean, they can take the weight of your subwoofer of whatever it is. Now they're ugly, but they're little squares, so you could kind of tuck them in and maybe put some black fabric over them if you really wanted to. Ralph wanted to mention he got a Dynasty Proaudio wireless subwoofer kit. It says it uses 5.2 or 5.8 gigahertz with 106 available RF channels via audio selection to avoid interference. Setup went smoothly and his new subwoofer position sounded great, but all was not well. His wife yelled from the bedroom that their TV wasn't working anymore. Okay. They use a dish hopper system with wireless Joey boxes for each TV. They've never had a problem with them in 6 years, but this new wireless subwoofer kit seems to mess them up. So he's back to figuring out how to run a long subwoofer cable. Is this kind of interference a common thing? I mean, there's so many
interference
that are bouncing around your
with
house at any
a
given
wireless
time that it
Yeah, sorry, we overlapped there in a Skype glitch. Interference in a wireless subwoofer kit definitely is a common thing. We've certainly heard people have interference issues with their Wi-Fi router, but normally it's the other way around, where normally it's the speakers that, give out some pops and clicks because they're getting interfered with. Normally the wireless subwoofer kit isn't the one that has you could call it brighter. It is light. Radio waves are part of the electromagnetic spectrum, so it's as if this one is flashing brighter than your Wi-Fi router is. That's essentially why it would overpower the signal that the Joeys are getting. I did read in the description that you can manually choose whether it uses the 5.2 gigahertz or the 5.8 gigahertz, and I don't know if the Joeys would get interfered with if you switched to the other frequency. So maybe give that a try before abandoning all hope.
Yeah, that's what I would do too. Yeah. That was my first thought is there a switch someplace on here that you can
I haven't had any
sort of manual
personal
adjustment
experience, but it said it in the description that between 5.2 and 5.8 is a manual switch, and then it's got all these various RF channels. It selects one of them automatically, so that doesn't seem to be manual. But the frequency band that you're using, supposedly you can choose. So maybe switching to the other one, whatever you're using now, switch to the other one. See if that works.
All right, let's get into the questions here. Jonathan from the SeaDen Theater. Is Seahawks or something?
I believe it was Seahawks. I'm pretty sure.
Something like that. I don't remember. So
I should look at his photos. Maybe it's in there.
It probably is.
It's blue and green. That's got to be Seahawks, right?
That's got to be Seahawks. All right. So Jonathan is finally ready to close the 6-foot opening at the back of his theater, which he again calls the SeaDen. That was our number one recommendation to him as far as his room goes. And after that, he'll be ready to tackle acoustic treatments. Okay. So we're looking. Mm-hmm. He's got looks like French doors or a door going outside.
Well, he's got sliding glass doors on the right side walls, so that's going outside. There is just a big opening on the back wall in basically the left corner of the back wall.
Yeah, I can see why this was hard because it doesn't open into a room, it opens into a hallway.
That's correct.
Yeah, that makes it hard to add doors and have them operate.
Although once you do have doors in there, soundproofing-wise, it should be better than if it went directly into another room, because that hallway acts as a little bit of an antechamber for you.
Yeah. So we suggested French doors, which he agrees would look nice for the 6-foot opening, but they would need to swing into the theater, not out, because of the hallway thing. So he isn't sure there's actually enough space for them. That made him consider a sliding door, barn style. But do we foresee any issues with that? Would it vibrate and create noise? Probably, would be my guess.
There are really beefy, steel rail, heavy barn doors that aren't bad that way, that won't vibrate, but they are not cheap. They are expensive to get those.
So the heavier it is, the less likely it's going to vibrate around. Right. That being said, you could put some dampening material just on like the bottom corners or wherever it might hit, in order to, if it vibrates back and forth, you won't maybe notice it as much. But they'll probably. I'm with you. I'm looking at your opening here and thinking, that's going to be tough. Really, the solution, and I'm not saying that it's a good one or one that you even want to do, is to put a regular door in there, close off half that opening so that is the back left of your of your room there, of your home theater. The door is on that side, as close to the corner as possible. So, and it would open so that, in my mind at least, so that it would open towards the side wall,
like a pretty normal door would in most rooms. Usually, they're closer.
I don't know if
you
want to do that, but if you put French doors and then you locked one of them,
yes.
So, and then that would accomplish the same thing.
Yeah. The thing is, if the distances he's given in the diagram, where he's got a little over 3 feet from the back wall to the back of his seats, if that's true, then if you had French doors and this opening is a little bit less than 6 feet wide, then it should be able to swing open, although those seats probably recline. In fact, I'm quite sure that they do.
Right, they do, yeah.
So I guess he's thinking, okay, if someone's sitting in that leftmost seat and they're reclined, then you're not going to be able to open the French door, because once it's reclined, it'll, the head will be back more than the 3-foot gap that he's got in his diagram. But, again, like Tom just said, if the French door that's on the right-hand side, if that one locks and it's only the one on the left-hand side that you enter through, then, even there, it should be able to swing open. So, like, I'm just a little bit hesitant to go with the barn door idea, the sliding door, for two reasons. One is the concern about it potentially rattling unless you go for a very expensive, heavy one with a really good, track system. The other one is he is going to be asking about acoustic treatments, and if you have a sliding door, I'm assuming it's going to be on the inside theater side, not on the outside hallway side, and therefore it
can't be on the theater side because it'll go right into that corner, I think. Unless you think it's...
There's
a wall right there.
To the back wall, right? Now, if you did that, you wouldn't be able to have any acoustic treatments on your back wall because the door would need to slide onto the, empty section of the back wall. So you'd have to take down the shelves that are there, take down the photos that are there, and then not have any acoustic treatments on your back wall. So... For those two reasons...
Or put it on the outside. I mean, that's the other option. Put it on the outside. I don't know what's on the other side of that.
Yeah. That seems awkward to have a door on the hallway side of the opening. I guess it's possible. It just wasn't my first instinct. Regardless, I think you could make a door work. So, like Tom said, either essentially build a section so that the opening isn't so large, and then you just have a normal door, that normal left-handed door that will open to the left side. Or if you did do French doors, I think it could work. Although, if you're reclined, you probably wouldn't want to use the right-hand side of it.
Right. So he's trying to do his own acoustic treatment research, but it just gets overwhelming. Aesthetics are a pretty big consideration in the room, so any treatments need to be enhanced, not detract from the looks. Pictures on the left and back walls can be moved or even nixed if necessary, but the overall look needs to remain. The entire right wall is taken up with sliding glass doors. There are flat shades for those right now, which he assumes are doing nothing acoustically. A single freestanding panel is the max he can envision on that side. What would happen if he ignores treating that side entirely? Well, I mean, it's just going to make things a little bit more difficult.
Right.
It's also going to make it very hard for you to balance out both sides of your room, if that makes sense. I mean, at least if you hit that first reflection point, you can drink, people.
I mean, think
that's one of the rules. I said it.
I think you could get away with a single freestanding panel that's on the right-hand side, and then just have a matching panel on the left-hand side. I don't think we need to overdo it on the side walls if we are able to treat the back wall and the front wall.
Well, now that we've kind of discovered that you can essentially cut out the words on movie posters and just get the image and print it on there. I mean, I know that I got mine from Gick Acoustics, right? And the Gick Acoustic ones that I got, and when I compared it to the actual picture, didn't exactly match up color-wise, and that's probably going to be the case no matter where you buy them from. They're never going to look exactly right. But if you're not sitting there A-B'ing them, they look great. So, you could do stuff that, obviously Seahawks fan, there's no reason that you can't put their logo up on things. I'm sure that's a possibility, or at least their colors, so that you've got the, heck, you could go as simple as getting the blue and the green, and then just alternating panel colors, right? And then that goes with your theme. Or doing a stripe, so that having a printed panel, so that there's the stripe that goes down the middle of, or maybe the top third of it, and with the top half being green, the bottom half being blue, or however you want to do it. I mean, you could really make this look quite put together. I can almost see it, like the panels on your sides being the blue green mix, and then panels in the back being the blue-green mix, and the center, like a panel in the center back wall that has the actual Seahawks logo on it, so that all the lines line up all the way around the room, gives it a nice sort of, that would look professional. Now, you can do this yourself, or you can have somebody like Gick do it for you. The difference is the amount of money you're going to spend. I mean, you can make your own panels with printed fabric for, a couple $100. Or you can spend $200-$300 per panel to have somebody else do it for you. Those are kind of your options. So, or it might even cost. Maybe you can save a little bit. It depends on how thick the panels are.
Yeah, this could be.
I think this could be good.
This could be one more argument, going back to the door thing, of either putting in the framing so that you just have a single door, or locking off the right-hand side of the French door, because then you could put a panel on there too, and that would be nice, because your seats do extend. That leftmost seat extends into, where you'd be entering the room there, so it'd be nice to be able to have the whole back wall treated, including, what is presently part of that opening. So that's one more reason to do that.
Right. I mean, there's no reason why. I mean, if you want to keep like the aesthetic all the same, there's no reason why you couldn't go freestanding panels all the way around. It's just less convenient and more expensive.
Yeah.
So you kind of have options here. I do like the idea. I mean, yes, as far as your glass door window is concerned, if you can only put one freestanding panel there, great.
That's fine.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
The rest of it doesn't have to. You don't have to treat the rest of it, but as much as you can do treatment wise all the way around them. And then we didn't talk about corners, but of course corners would
That's
also
coming up.
go in there as well. So he doesn't want the front wall to end up looking messy. Already has 3 TVs mounted, plus his front 3 Ascendant speakers, a big sub in the front right corner, and his gear stand in the front left corner. He'd be okay putting panels behind the speakers and maybe above the middle TV. Would that be worth it? Could more be done without it looking crowded? Let me go back and look at this.
I mean, my honest instinct to suggest to you is, could you put up some stick framing, throw some 2-inch thick insulation in there with a little bit of an air gap, and cover the whole front wall with fabric? Like, the entire front wall becomes one big panel that you make. It's the same gray color. You could have little cutouts for where the TVs are mounted and where the center speaker is mounted. But you could make that entire front wall a DIY panel, essentially, just with some stick framing and some insulation and fabric. That's my first instinct, because that's as clean a look as I can think. It's the whole front wall now. There's nothing sticking out. But there's no reason you can't get matching panels that match the color of that front wall. I don't think on the front wall he wants to get away from the gray. I'm pretty sure he chose that neutral gray color for a reason. So you can get some neutral gray panels that will blend in pretty darn nicely, and it doesn't have to be distracting at all, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't see a huge benefit to putting like a panel behind the TVs, or trying to tuck them behind the TVs. I mean, they do something. That's not, but I just feel like, like I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, kind of horizontal panels underneath the 2 side TVs and maybe one horizontal panel above the TVs. And then if I really wanted to do a little bit more, I could put one of those tri-traps on the floor underneath the center channel there, or maybe even 2 of them. It depends on how wide that is. You might be able to get 2 back there.
But you could do all of that in neutral gray, and it doesn't have to be an eyesore at all.
No, I would definitely try to get matched fabric. I gotta scroll. Since he's pretty much, there's pretty much no chance he'll end up covering 30% of the room's surfaces, so you just put as many 2-inch thick panels on the left wall and back wall as possible. Should be worrying about the types of panels, diffusion, combo, membrane, all that confusing stuff. No, just absorption.
just absorption. And
I mean, if you really want to go with like again, if you want to do the color thing, you could get the combination panel and then have like the whatever the great thing is on the front, have that be the blue or the green, and then the fabric underneath be the opposite color, and then you've got that sort of. But that's more of an aesthetic concern to me than it is an acoustic one. Acoustically, absorption. I swear, if I read one more person on Reddit look at somebody's home theater that has absolutely no absorption in it and say just some diffusion would help in there, I'm gonna lose my mind. But I am gonna lose it.
I wouldn't recommend like treating your entire left wall simply because that is a wall that you could. I would try to have that match the right hand wall, more or less. If you had 2 panels on the left wall and only the one freestanding panel on the right, that's fine. But I wouldn't try to like cover the whole left wall simply because it exists. If you get some panels on the front wall, some panels on the back wall, and a panel each on the left and the right wall, you're in pretty darn good shape.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's good. He said there's space on his ceiling. Should he mount ceiling panels? I mean, I won't say no, but at the same time, I won't say yes.
Yeah.
To me, ceiling panels, there's something about putting things on your ceiling
hanging down.
that just doesn't. It feels extreme to me.
Right.
And I've had rooms that have had that.
Sure.
And you walk in there, everybody goes, what's going on? You know what I mean?
Are those going to fall on me? Yeah.
Exactly. No matter what you say or do, they're always going to kind of look up at those things and be a little uncomfortable. So would it help? It probably wouldn't hurt. Would it, would I do it? I probably wouldn't. But I think that's more of an aesthetic concern for me and like a comfort concern than anything else. People look at stuff on your walls and go, oh, okay, that's stuff on walls. People put things on walls all the time. They don't think that about your ceiling. He said Gick focused mainly on bass traps when he asked them. They wanted to treat all the corners, but he doesn't think he really has much room in the corners. So what do we think? I love putting the tri-traps on the ground along the walls.
The other one I was thinking is that the soffit traps all around the ceiling, maybe not on the front wall. You don't necessarily have to have the soffit trap go across the front wall, but on the right wall, the back wall, and the left wall, I see no reason you couldn't do... Now, you might want to get the measurements because the standard default soffit trap might be a little bit too tall for the doorway, possibly, but they can customize.
Yeah.
They can definitely customize, and they can do different colors. So it doesn't have to be black or white. You could do colors that could complement your wall colors, complement the gray, whatever you want to do. But a soffit trap all around the perimeter of your room, first of all, performance-wise, better than any other bass trap you can get are the soffit traps, just because they're the biggest. And then that look, I think, would work completely in this room. So that's what I would.
It's got that AC vent too on this left wall. It looks like
you can go around that though.
Yeah,
they'll custom make the size you need.
So it doesn't make a big difference if the panels are vertical or horizontal. He's got some art panel ideas in mind, but for the images he wants, they probably need to be horizontal. The sound doesn't really care.
No.
The sound. It's just height-wise for like tweeter stuff. If you're doing first reflection points, then you want to make sure that you're it's in the range so that the tweeter will hit that panel. So
and for the panels on the back wall, it would certainly be preferable if that could be head height and just above head height. Like that's where you would want to have the height of the panel. But if it looks better being a horizontal panel that is behind the heads of the listeners, totally fine. Nothing wrong with that at all.
Knock yourself out.
Yeah.
All right, Aidan. Aidan recently moved and he intends to put his theater in the loft area of his new place. He'd like to make it enclosed if possible. There's one doorway size opening with no door and an existing door, just a typical interior door. What kind of door would you recommend installing, and should the same type of door be used for both the opening and to replace the existing door? If you could provide cheap, middle, and no-cost options, that would be appreciated. Well, the no-cost option is like one of those...
Well, cost no object, not no cost. Cost would be literally doing nothing.
Cost no object option. Sorry, I read that backwards. I would... like one of those,
beads,
like safe.
Safe. A vault door. That would be cost
that
no
would be
object.
the cost no option.
There was at one point like a THX certified door. I don't think anybody sells it anymore, but there was at one point a THX certified door. But no, like a vault door would be the cost no object. You would have to install some sort of air return in there so you don't die. Right. The quote unquote cheap option that is better than just your super cheap hollow core interior door would just be a solid core interior door. Yeah. That's the quote unquote cheap option. It's more expensive than a hollow core door, as you would expect. There's just more material in there. But a solid core door, you'd still have if there's a gap under the current door, there'd still be a gap under the door. We're not changing anything. It's just solid core instead of hollow core. The middle option would be an exterior grade door. That's in this scenario, that's the middle option, is exterior grade. Now, exterior grade door is going to be sealed. So that is where you have to really make sure what is the airflow in this room, because most rooms, the air return is the gap under the door. That's most rooms. So you don't want to seal off that gap under the door unless you know for a fact that there is an air return inside the room that you're sealing, or you are going to modify the HVAC so that there is an air return inside the room that you're sealing. Air has to be able to come in and get back out. So that's the big consideration there. No reason you can't do it with enough money, but it's just something to be aware of. Should both doors be the same thing? I mean, I would, assuming that both doors lead somewhere that you care about sound getting into or out of. If
that second door is going to the attic, I wouldn't care.
Yeah, or if it's going into a closet, then I don't care too much. Or it's going into a ensuite bathroom or something like that. Then I probably don't care about that. But if both of these are leading into hallways or other rooms and you care about the sound getting in and or out of the theater, then I would put the same type of door on both, because that's the
and if you're looking at that second door that you have in this room, and it's going to the attic or something like that, and there's weather stripping or something along the bottom of it
already
that already there, that suggests that and your other opening is just an opening. Well, there's your air return right there.
Probably.
You need to make sure that whatever door is installed there allows for the air return.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, you're not going to die, but
it ain't great.
It's not good for you. You're going to get headaches, CO2 poisoning or whatever.
Temperature is going to be a real problem.
Temperature is going to be a problem. You won't be able to pump any cold air in there. You need to have your air return.
Like if you do put a solid core door in what is currently just a wide open opening, and it has a gap underneath because you're not going to modify your HVAC. Obviously, anytime you have a gap around your door, it's not going to be 100% soundproof, but it's going to be a lot more soundproof than a wide open opening. Hey, we can make somebody drink again. I think of water filling up your room. A wide open opening is just going to let the water out. Whereas if you have any type of door there, even a hollow core door, it is
at least slow it down.
It's going to slow it down, and sound works in a similar way.
Dennis has a 5.2.4 configuration. He's using his Marantz SR6014 to power the front 3 speakers, and he used the pre-outs to send the surround and 4 overhead channels to an older Yamaha 665 receiver that has 7.1 analog inputs. So the Yamaha powers the surrounds and 4 overheads. He's thinking he might like to buy an emo, but here comes another drinking opportunity. He's thinking you might like to buy an Emotiva Bassox A3 3-channel amp. He'd use that to power his front 3 speakers. Would there be any benefit if he continues to use the Yamaha, leaving his Marantz SR6014 to function strictly as a pre-pro, or should he nix the Yamaha, use the Marantz to power the surrounds and overheads with the Emotiva power in the front 3? There will be no sonic difference between what you're doing. I mean, unless you're dealing with very inefficient speakers or they are very far away from you, I very much don't feel like you're going to hear a difference. Now, if you're sitting at your main spot, and the sound's on, but there's nothing playing, and you hear a hiss, okay, then yes, maybe you can do something here. But I really don't feel like you're going to...
Right. Like, my instinct in a 5.2.4 configuration would be to just run all 9 speakers off the Marantz and not have any external amplifiers of any sort, be it the Yamaha or the Emotiva. However, my guess
is he's just had the Yamaha lying around anyway, so he's like, I might as well use it, which I think is perfectly reasonable.
That's perfectly fine, and I'm in a room that's probably smaller than Dennis's, and I've got an ATI amp going in there, so I'm not against having external amps just because you want to have one, as long as you are aware that you're doing it just because you want to have one and not because you're expecting gigantic differences and improvements in the sound. No beef with it. If you were to do this, if you're just like, look, I just want to buy an Emotiva 3-channel amp, I'm not expecting a big improvement, but I just want to do it, then I would do your second scenario. I would let the Emotiva power the front 3, and I would power the rest of the speakers off the Marantz. I would not have a third box in your Yamaha to act as yet another amplifier and not use any of the amplifiers built into the Marantz. So scenario 2, if that's what you're going to do. I will say this, you've got the SR6014, so that is a year prior to when they introduced the ability to run the receivers strictly as a pre-pro, where it disconnects the internal amplifiers entirely. That was this SR6015 has that feature where it turns off the internal amplifiers 100% and only gives you pre-outs active. But the 6014 does not have that option, so there's no benefit to be had by not using any of the internal amps of your Marantz model. And one of those scenarios.
Yes. Chris asks an interesting question. If you use a bookshelf speaker as a center, laying it on its side, tweeter rotated 9 degrees if necessary, should you position it a bit off-center so the tweeter is directly in line with the primary seat, or should you still center the whole cabinet of the speaker, even though that will put the tweeter slightly to the left or right of dead center? That's a good question. I think optimally, you would position the tweeter dead center.
Okay.
I think that sonically, you probably won't be able to notice much of a difference.
Yeah. My thought
I think that visually, I would leave the speaker grill on and center the speaker in the room and just try not to think about where the tweeter might be underneath that thing.
Yeah.
I think that's how I would go about this.
Yeah, my honest, and I'm not, it's humorous, but I'm not actually joking. My honest opinion is that if you take the speaker grill off and you're looking at it, and you center the speaker physically so that the tweeter is slightly off center, you are going to swear up up and down that all of the dialogue is coming slightly to the left or slightly to the right of center. Whereas if you put the grill on and you can't see it, you won't notice no matter what you do. That's my absolutely genuine opinion of how this will work.
There's a psychological element to this that's massive.
Yep.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I would leave the grill on and center the speaker and try not to think about it as much as possible. Listen to this podcast for 2 hours, and at the end of this podcast, with your empty bottle of scotch, you will not remember where that tweeter was, and it will not bother you anymore.
And if no matter
We're saving lives, Rob.
No matter what we say, you swear up and down that you can hear the difference, then this is a trial and error scenario. If this might be honestly different across some different speakers, maybe there will be some speakers where a difference could be heard, but I really don't. If you can't see it, I really don't think you would ever know.
Yeah. I would have you, if you think you can tell the difference, I would have you bring a trusted friend in, or family member, and sit them down with the speaker grill on and ask them which side of the speaker the tweeter is on.
Yes.
And if they can figure it
understand
out.
your question, they got to begin with.
I know, right? They're going to look at you like, what is your problem?
I guess you could go buy a calf, buy a calf bookshelf that just has a concentric driver, and then you really don't have to worry.
I'll be honest with you, visually it does bother me when I have a bookshelf speaker that is just turned on its side. It just looks strange. But I just don't, I don't know. I just don't think that it's going to make any sonic difference, but it would bother me. It would bother me, I'll be honest. Jason says, we recently recommended sticking with monopole speakers for the surround positions rather than going for dipole or bipole surround speakers. The rationale given was that the new object-based immersive audio formats, Atmos and DTS-X, are designed to work best with monopole speakers all around. And here we go. What if the majority of content you watch is not in Atmos or DTS-X? What if you're mostly still listening to 5.1 or 7.1 soundtracks? Mm-hmm. It will still sound fine, and you should get the monopole speakers.
On the chance that you do upgrade or begin listening to more immersive audio, that's one.
I mean, it was never a problem using monopole speakers in 5.1 or 7.1 systems before. It's just that people out there preferred the slightly more diffuse sound. And most of that, in my mind, is because our rooms sucked. Okay, so this giving them that diffuse sound, kind of took a little bit of the room out of the situation because it was going in all directions anyways. Mm-hmm. Well, having that monopole sound maybe made it a little bit think about when we had 6.1, right? Mm-hmm. When we had 6.1, they had a center speaker and a center back speaker, and sometimes the center back speaker would bounce off the front of the wall and make it sound like it was coming from the front. It freaked everybody out. Well, putting a few speakers back, behind you, kind of eliminated any issues you might have had that would be like that. So to me, the bipole dipole speakers, and I have owned them until recently. I owned them as well. Are fine, and I think you can use them if you really want to. I mean, if you're looking for our permission, get them. I don't care. You asked us which one are the best ones. These are the best ones. And if you want to convince us they're not the best ones, you're not gonna. So you buy them if you want to. It's fine.
Well, I think the other thing was going back, years past. You would see a lot of people where they thought of the surround speakers as rear speakers. They thought of them as back speakers.
Right.
So they were on the back wall, pointing forward at ear level, and none of the sounds were coming from where they were supposed to be coming from, but that's where tons of people thought the speakers were supposed to go. So having the dipole speakers just kind of fuzzied all that up and made things sound a little bit more diffuse and enveloping. I mean, I'll say this much. There is a difference between bipole and dipole, because dipole speakers, you've got these two sides of a speaker. They're usually kind of trapezoidal shaped, or, they've at least got two tweeters, but those drivers are out of phase. So right in the middle, right in between those two things, there is a full-on null. The sound is canceling at that point. And, the idea of that design was to try and mimic the multiple speakers that are lining the side walls of a commercial movie theater, so that you never really hear a direct sound in a movie theater. It's all kind of mushed together. So the dipole speaker on your side walls was supposed to sort of mimic that by having a full-on cancellation right at that middle spot, which would be the spot directly beside your ears. But a bipole speaker, all the drivers are in phase. They're all firing together, so it makes it in effect, not really any different than having two separate speakers that just happen to be playing together. So to me, a bipole speaker, if it's designed well and playing well, it's just like an exceedingly wide dispersion monopole speaker. That in effect, that's what it should sound like. So if I were to choose, if you're just like, look, I like the looks and the convenience of mounting one of these bipole speakers on my sidewall more than a monopole that needs a mount or needs to go on a shelf. If that's the reason you want to get a bipole, I have very little qualms with going with a bipole surround speaker because it's like a very wide dispersion monopole. I would probably stay away from dipole these days, though. I honestly would. Having that null there just doesn't make a whole lot of sense anymore.
Actually makes them harder to place too, because you have to not sit on the null.
That's right. You want to sit in the null and nowhere else of a dipole surround speaker. It's a weird thing. I would avoid a dipole these days, kind of bar none.
So most of the speakers of that type, like at least later in the development cycles, almost all of them came out with switches that gave you the option of switching them to bipole or dipole. So we asked, because this is going to go along with what I'm going to say next, what if you already own bipole surround speakers? Would switching to monopole speakers provide an advantage? Even if it isn't necessary, would there be any audible benefit at all? So I switched from bipoles to monopoles, and did I notice a difference? I mean, yeah, a little bit. I would say that the sounds as they, because now I had the traditional 7.1 setup, which is bipole side surrounds and monopole rear surrounds. Right. I will tell you that when the Xbox One, everybody grab your glass, when the Xbox One messed up with the audio and it put all my side surround information in the surround backs that were monopoles, it was the distinction between things moving around the room was much better than when I had the bipoles engaged instead.
But when the idea is for it to sound more homogeneous and seamless, then it kind of makes sense that the bipole has a little bit of an advantage there potentially.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're looking for sounds to be directed around, the monopoles are better. If you're looking for a more diffuse sound, well, of course, the bipoles are better. That being said, if you already own them...
I mean, yeah, and he said bipole. So going back to the advice I just talked about, if you already own bipole surround speakers, I would be in no hurry to replace those. I think that is perfectly fine to stay with.
I think there's so many other things you can do in your home theater that will make a better difference than switching from bipoles to monopoles. I really don't feel like it's a huge benefit. I mean, if you are buying now, you buy monopoles. Sure. If you've already got speakers, use what you got, and then when you have nothing else to do with your thing, then you can go, okay, well, now I'm going to upgrade my speakers. All right. Lance appreciated a discussion about his home theater that he's set up in his finished attic space. This is the yellow theater, yellow and gray.
Yes.
Which is, I do like it. He described last time how he ended up with his dual PC 12 Plus subs, which are not as good as mine, in the two front corners of his room.
They are objectively better in at least two ways.
I don't agree. I agree to disagree there, Rob.
Okay.
Dual PC 12 Plus subs in the front two corners of his room. He had experimented with multiple different placements before, but the two corners were about as good as anywhere else as far as the frequency response go. So he put them there, and since that keeps them out of the way of walkways, his biggest limitation is that there isn't any space anywhere along his back wall to put a sub. So last time, before getting into dual subwoofer placement and the idea of potentially adding third and fourth subs, we suggest that since it's a finished attic space that goes up to 12 feet at its highest point, maybe he could acoustically treat a big section of his ceilings and create a huge bass trap. It seems as though we were assuming his ceiling goes up to a point, since we couldn't see the top of the ceiling in the original photos he sent. So just to clarify, much of the ceiling is actually flat, and the flat portion is at 12 feet, 11 feet at the back, since the seating riser is a foot taller. I be honest with you, I thought that those other pictures were very confusing.
Okay.
Because, so he's got a flat ceiling up there. And
he does. That's a very tall room.
It is a very tall room. So now what do we think? Is there a way to turn his ceiling into a giant bass trap? He's got in-ceiling overhead speakers installed up there, as well as some recessed ceiling lights down the middle, front to back, and some HVAC registers. I I mean, there's like corners here.
Yeah, they're all kind of grooves, and like I'm actually looking more at the angled parts now.
Yeah, the ones on the wall that angled up. I mean, it seems like you could treat those. I mean, really, the whole thing. You'll have to actually put like these. Like we were talking about, like we thought it was an A-frame, right?
Right.
So you could just basically take the top of the A-frame and make it flat, and fill it up with insulation. But here, he's got angles that go to a flat ceiling. So on the angles up, you really only have to use the angles. You could just put them on the walls up there. Just keep.
Yeah, I mean, particularly that, like, because some of the walls come in a bit more than others. So on the sections that are still back there, right? The sections that aren't coming in on those angled portions of the ceiling sides there, I would, that could all be bass trapped there. You kind of make it even with visually, and then you got yourself some major bass trapping there. You could also definitely put cloud type panels up there because you've got all the ceiling height, so having some panels that are hanging down a ways from your ceiling wouldn't look crazy at all. Right.
You've also got that front right above the screen. You've got that where the wall meets the ceiling. You could put basically a Gick tri-trap style thing going across there.
You got plenty of
just straddle the panel.
Plenty of room there. Yeah, the rest of your ceiling is all angled already, so if you had another angle that's on your front wall, it wouldn't look out of place.
Yeah. And then I would just get panels that were the exact same color as my walls in here.
Sure.
And just have them blend. So digging into the subwoofer situation, his pre-pro is the Monolith HTP-1, so he's got DRAC. He also has a mini DSP and Room EQ Wizard. So he began by measuring his current bass frequency response at the 4 seats he cares most about, his 3 front row seats and the middle seat of the back row. This is with his dual subs in the 2 front corners of his room. With DRAC on his 3 front row seats measure reasonably uniform, although they don't look very linear to him. But the seat in the back row looks terrible. A huge peak at 40 hertz and then a huge dip at about 58, and a full-on null at 80. So he's measured just at the main listening position with DRAC turned off. He didn't measure the other 3 seats with DRAC turned off, but at the main seat, DRAC off actually looked best. So there's a bunch of measurements here.
Yes,
if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see.
If you're on YouTube or following along on Flickr, there is a black line that is like the most flat. It's the closest to flat going across is the black line. And that is the main listening position with DRAC turned off. All right. Yeah. So that's that one. That's why he's saying that one to him looked the best. Now there's a cluster of 3 lines that all have very similar shapes. The shape of
that
3 lines.
Front 3 seats.
Yeah, they're not perfectly overlapping, but the shape of them is all similar. And okay, he's got, I think plus minus 12 dB at the worst of it is about how bad those get in terms of some peaks and some dips below the average. It looks worse than it is. I've got to say that it looks worse on a graph than it would if you play a sweep in any of your front 3 seats. I don't think you would hear it nearly as much as you expect to based on looking at a graph, because in deep bass, 40 hertz is probably the worst one. We're not good at hearing 40 hertz, and if you have a bit of a peak there, it's actually probably kind of pleasing. The back middle seat, though, that sucker is a problem. There is no 2 ways about it. That is not a great response. That is not what we want. Huge peak, huge null. So I will agree with you. You have not achieved uniform bass that extends to your back row. No way.
And my guess here is that if you took measurements at all 4 of these seats, that's why your line with DRAC on looks so much worse than your line with DRAC off.
Right.
Because it's trying to do as much as it can for all these seats at the same time. And it's messing up, which is essentially like, if you just took that last seat out, the seat behind you out, if you just left that one out, I bet this line would look a lot better just overall. Like, how much do you really care about that seat back there?
Right. Oh, and I do want to stress the 3 seats across the front, it isn't that bad. I know on a graph, you're like, oh, the graph goes up and down. It's not a perfectly flat line. But honestly, that is not a bad response in those 3 seats across the front.
So this is what I would do if I were you. So if you have done this in general, before we go on with anything else, if you really do care about that second row of seats, the middle seat, the second row of seats, ask yourself, do you care about it all the time, or do you care about it sometimes?
But coming up in what he's done further, I think we're going to get to a place that's really not too bad at all.
So let's just talk about this in general, though, for everybody else.
For everybody else. Yeah.
So if if you find out that, that if you like, sometimes I sit in the back row and sometimes I sit in the front row, and, I want to make sure that both those sound good. You have the ability, at least with this, to and even Odyssey nowadays with the Editor Pro app, or Editor app, you have the ability to save your configuration. So it might take you a little bit more time, but if you really care only about a certain row of seats at certain times, you need to save both configurations separately.
Sure.
Not do one grand one, because this is what you end up with, which is it trying to do the best it can, but at the same time, actually, with it not doing anything at all in the front seat, actually looks better than it having trying to.
We don't know for sure, though, that with Dirac off, that his seats to the left and right, this is in the front row.
Right. We don't know.
We don't know. I mean, it could be. We're not saying it isn't for sure, but we don't know just because the measurements didn't include that. So, but what we can conclude here is that having both of your subs on the front wall in the two front corners, you are not achieving uniform or anything close to uniform bass in both rows of seats. So we know that much heading into things.
Yeah. Right. So then he moved the two subs to the middle of the side walls as we had suggested. Now, the approach he used was as follows. He measured the bass frequency response with no room correction of any kind, but only at the main listening position. Then he used Room EQ Wizard and his Mini DSP to try to make that look as close to his target frequency response as possible. So we're looking at this now. Which one? I guess the red one is the corrected one, and the blue one is the not corrected one.
Yeah, so there's a red one that is pretty close to a flat line. He's got a little bit of a rise in the bass, but that is intentional. He wants the bass to gradually get a little bit louder as you go down. That's a house curve, a very common thing. We have no beef with it.
80 hertz too.
Yeah, and so that's...
Or 60? 60.
Well, in the uncorrected, it's got a little dip and a little peak, but in the corrected one, it's pretty flat, except that it's a gradual rise as we go lower and lower. So yeah, that's looking good. But again, we're only seeing the main listening position in this one. We don't know what's happening to his left seat and his right seat.
So once that was done, he ran DRAC, and then he measured the before and after results. But again, only at the main listening position. DRAC seemed to make the frequency response worse at the main seat. So I don't know what I'm looking at.
So here the red line, if you're following along, that's DRAC turned on. Okay, so this is the main listening position. Dirac turned on at the main listening position. The frequency response does not look great. We've got a pretty good dip at 40 hertz, basically a null at 80 hertz for some reason, and then a pretty darn big hump down at 20 hertz. And yeah, that's all of that stuff. The green line is pressing the bypass button. So that is turning off the correction, but for some reason it's still just lowering the overall volume. And then the blue line is with Dirac just completely turned off, not being bypassed, but just completely turned off altogether. And in the main listening position, that delivered the flattest response. So yeah, a little bit strange there, but if he was measuring in all of his seats, including the back row, when he goes and measures for Dirac, then that can explain why the main seat got worse. Because we're only, with Dirac off or bypassed, we're only seeing the main listening position, and we don't know what's happening in the other seats at that point. So that's the bit of confusion that's going on there. We can't just say, oh, Dirac is bad. Okay, it made this one seat worse, but because it's trying to correct for all seats.
Yeah, we're not really sure.
Yeah.
So then he tried running Dirac first, and after Dirac was done, he tried to make his main seat look as good as possible using Room EQ Wizard and the Mini DSP. On the already Dirac corrected signal this time, he measured all 4 seats and got the results he considers not great, but pretty decent. Well, these are way better.
Okay, so I mean, I don't think these are merely decent results. I think these are really good results. He's, plus minus 7, plus minus 8?
At
the worst of it. At the worst of it. And this is including the seat in the middle of the back row. That's including, and that is the most squiggly one. That is the worst one. And even that one is within plus minus 8 dB. So,
I mean, they all converge too, right? At 18 hertz or 19 hertz, where they're almost exactly the same volume, but they're within 3 dB from 20 to 25. They have a problem at 30. but then they
if
come
you
back
even
together.
Want to call it a problem? I mean, a variance.
It's the 7 dB.
Sure.
That's the 7 dB problem.
Yeah.
But everything else is a lot closer than that, like by far.
And so this, what we're seeing here is that, okay, whether he turned Dirac off or on, when he had both subs up at the front of the room, he just wasn't able to get that back row looking good at all. But now with both subs at the midpoints of his two side walls, he doesn't think that this is anything greater than decent. I'm like, dude, this is for that back row that's on your back wall, that's remarkably good response that you've achieved. Again, I would beg you.
And he's got 1/12 octave smoothing on this thing, so he's seeing almost everything that there is to see. I mean, if you put on like what you would normally see a smooth curve here, this thing would look this would look like almost like a straight line with everything overlapping almost completely.
Like, I would beg you, play sweeps and just listen to them. Put the graphs out of your mind. Just listen to the sweep. And if you can honestly tell me that you're hearing bad differences seat to seat with this response that you're looking at, even in your back row, like I frankly wouldn't believe it. So I think you're done. I certainly would be at this point. I'm like, that's great. That's a great result.
Yeah. It's hard to look at these squiggly lines not totally overlapping and being completely flat.
Sure.
And wonder, what could be. But this is what you have when you're you're in your small room, very long wavelengths of sound, trying to get them all to sound exactly the same.
What's interesting to me is going back to that image he had where he only measured in the main listening position. He had both subs in the middle of the side walls. He ran Dirac, and with Dirac on, it gave him this not great looking result in his main listening position. And yet, when he went back and he manually corrected that response, but then measured in all four seats, he got these really quite uniform-looking results in all four seats. That indicates to me, I mean, there's no way that could happen unless Dirac had actually managed to give you pretty uniform response. Right. Like, weird, it is, I will fully admit, it's weird that it achieved what must have been fairly uniform response, but not linear. And then you manually linearized it, but that was effective in all seats. So it is strange. I'm not going to argue whatsoever that the Dirac by itself, without you manually doing anything afterwards, is a strange result. I'm not exactly sure why it must have been pretty close to uniform, but didn't result in linear. I can't explain that, but clearly the results after Dirac were something reasonably close to uniform.
Okay. Let me scroll down here. Mm-hmm. So beyond his current results, he's wondering if it's worth running Dirac at all. He doesn't allow it to EQ above 300 hertz since he believes EQ shouldn't be applied to the room's transition frequency, which is a thing I still don't understand why people have decided is a thing, but whatever. And if he's manually correcting what it did in the bass, that means it's essentially only doing its thing between 90 hertz and 300 hertz, which is not true.
That's not true.
because it did something, and then you tailored it. Yeah. So that's fine. And what concerns him most is that it didn't seem to recognize the good measurement when he had corrected his main seat first and then run Dirac second. It made things worse. This happened to him before when he had the Anthem Pre-Pro and used ARC. He can't be sure if Odyssey did the same thing since he wasn't taking room EQ wizard measurements back when he had Odyssey, but he figures it wouldn't have been any better. So given his experience with room correction programs, he isn't keen to pay even more money to add the new Dirac Live bass control feature. What do we think? I don't know that we're arriving at the same conclusions that you are based on. I
think there's a little bit of a disconnect between uniformity and linearity.
Yes, I think he's not only looking at this graph and saying these lines aren't close enough together, but he's looking at like the yellow one, and which goes from a very hot, from like a 99 decibels down to 75 decibels, in overall volume, and thinking this is not linear. And I think that's where we're having a disconnect here.
I mean,
he wants this line to be razor flat, and that's just not something that you.
He's probably seen the result that Home Theater Gurus achieved in his room, which is a perfect rectangle with 4 subs, 1 in each corner, and he got essentially completely overlapping flat lines, right? And I mean, that's great. He did, Home Theater Gurus, he did all the things. He built a room that is essentially a perfect rectangle. He put 4 subs, 1 in each corner, which is definitely a recommended placement by Harmon and Todd Welty and everybody else. And he went through individually tailing each sub with a mini DSP and Room EQ Wizard, and he wound up with this, textbook-looking result. The notion that is the only acceptable result in bass, like that's, we're trying to get you away from that. Like that's why I keep begging you, just listen to the suite, because your ears are not as sensitive as your U-Mic 1 to bass. That we just don't hear bass that way. So I think you've arrived at a fantastic result. I would not deactivate Dirac entirely, because like I say, the evidence here when you've measured in all 4 seats is that it did achieve something pretty close to uniformity, and I'm not sure you would be there without it.
Well, the two things that are working together is the fact that you move the subs out of the front of the room.
Yeah,
I mean that's the number one thing that's happened here is you gave Dirac more to work with. Mm-hmm. So when you had subs that were essentially co-located at the front of your room.
The back row was no good.
Yeah, the back row was terrible. And I mean, like, awful. And then that, by measuring there, also messed up the front row, at least from what we can gather based on these measurements. And that's just like, I mean, you can come up with all sorts of analogies, but you give somebody bad tools and they do a bad job, whose fault is it? They did the best they could with what you gave them. Dirac did the best they could with the measurements you gave them. Now, once you move the subs and then you run Dirac, and then you went through a major, like, one thing that I often say to my kids, or to regardless of what situation you're in, if you make one change, you can tell whether or not that change made a difference. But you can't make multiple changes and then ascribe blame to one thing that you've decided is the thing that didn't do its job, or that made all the difference. So when you're cycling, if you raise your seat height, don't change your bar height, because you won't know what it is that's out of whack at that point. If you add the second subwoofer, don't add a second subwoofer and then put a bunch of room treatments in there and say the room treatments made a difference, or the subwoofer. You won't know which one made the difference. Here, you've changed where the location is, then you ran Dirac, and then you made some manual adjustments, and you look at it and you go, well, I don't think Dirac really did anything. Well, how would you? I mean,
the thing he could do is keep the 2 subs at the midpoints of the side walls, turn Dirac off entirely, measure at multiple places, do the manual correction that he's already doing using Room EQ Wizard and a mini DSP 2x4 HD, do all those things and see if it's similarly uniform after that. If it's similarly uniform, or in fact even better, then you could say, okay, I don't need Dirac. But with the results that you have, this was running Dirac first and then manually EQing it to taste to the mini DSP second. And this is the result you've got. I would be very happy with the result. What I do agree with is I don't think you need the Dirac Live bass control. I don't think you need to pay the additional $100 to get that. It wouldn't do a great job with only 2 subs anyway. It really needs 3 or 4 subs spread out around your room to mathematically do what it's designed to do.
But I think the real key here is that we've arrived at I mean, I don't care what metric you use. You look at the first measurements and you look at the last measurements. They are clearly an improvement. And what was the big difference? You spent no money and you moved your subs where we told you to put them in the first place. So that is a huge win. We're telling you, don't spend $100 on an extra. Don't buy 2 more subs and try to place them in different places. We're saying if you move your subs and you run the room correction, and if you wanted to manually tailor it, great. But you don't. You didn't spend any money. You spent some time. You didn't spend any money. And this is certainly a better result than what you had.
And look at the extension he's getting. Well below 20 hertz.
I know. It's awesome.
It's good stuff.
He says, on to some different topics. At the moment, his projector is plugged into a commercial-rated extension cord. That extension cord goes up around the projector mount and into the ceiling, and then it comes back down into his equipment rack, which is behind the cabinet doors on the left wall, near the back corner. He's got a Panamax line conditioner in his rack, so the projector is plugged into that via the extension cord. If it's running in the walls, I mean, I don't think you can do this. Can you do this? Is this something you can do?
I mean, I'm not sure if there is such a thing as an in-wall rated extension cord. Like he made sure to mention it's commercial grade, but I'm like, that doesn't necessarily mean in-wall rated.
If your house burns down and they find that thing, you're going to be having to do some explaining, Lucy.
Yeah.
So I would not do this. I don't think this is a thing that. But anyways, that's beyond.
Yeah, because we don't know for sure the code, and we don't know for sure exactly what he's using. It's possible there's some kind of in-wall or in-attic rated extension cord. It's within the realm of possibility, but we don't know, and we're a little bit. We question it a little. We'll leave it there.
Yeah, I would definitely talk to an electrician. So he'd like to have a battery backup, but there are no more outlets available in his rack. So should he plug a battery backup into his Panamax line conditioner and then plug the extension cord into the new battery backup? His other option is that he actually has an electrical outlet high up on his back wall. Should he construct a small shelf that can hold a battery backup and just use that? You could do that one.
I like the second option.
The second one for sure is legal.
Yes.
The second one, plug the battery backup into the Panamax and then plug the extension cord into the battery. I don't know why you would need...
Well, just because he doesn't have any other outlets. He's like, unplug his extension cord. Right. That frees up one plug and only one plug, so we could plug the battery back up into that now freed up plug.
Yeah. Do the other thing.
Build a little shelf, and put the battery back up in the room high up where you already have an outlet. I am much more a fan of that idea.
So how should he aim his front wide speakers? He knows Rob is a fan of front wides, and he only added his quite recently. Given that he has 2 rows of seats, where should the front wides be aimed? He wound up with the front left and right speakers towed in so that they aim straight at the middle seat in the back row. Should the front wides aim at that same spot? I don't know, Rob. I think you should aim them in a box and sell them.
Well, I mean, there's always Tom's method of you basically point them straight forward, you basically aim them straight at the middle seat in the front row, and then you trial and error, try all the ranges in between.
Play some sweeps. Play some left-right sweeps and see how it sounds.
And that'll certainly get you there, trial and error. My approach is the same as my approach to all my other speakers, basically, which is I just play the pink noise, like just the pink noise that's built into HTP1 in your case when you're setting the speaker levels. Just play that pink noise, or you've got Room EQ Wizard, play some pink noise out of the speakers. I get right up close to the speakers, and I just start with myself, like 1 foot in front of the speaker, right up close to it, listen to that pink noise, and then gradually move myself to the left and right. And by doing that, I can figure out the cone of dispersion that speaker makes coming out of it. And I just want all the seats that I care about to be within that cone. That means all of them are getting pretty close to similar sound, at least the direct sound coming out of the speaker. And I base my toe in and aiming of speakers on that cone of dispersion.
Okay. I'm not doing that thing that he does. I don't want to get that close to my speakers. My ears. I'm too old for that. John in the Philippines. John has a dedicated home theater. It's carpeted. He's got wood columns and soffits, and all the walls are covered in fabric.
This theater looks gorgeous. You want to take a look at the pictures of these. This is a gorgeous looking theater. He's got this screen up front that I guess is retractable. It certainly looks like he's got
that's what it looks like.
Collectibles behind there, gorgeously lit up behind his screen. So when you come in, you're seeing that, and then the screen comes down in front of it. That is so cool. But the whole place looks nice. Cool. I really love this stretched fabric that he's done. So he's got these wood columns, then in between them, he's got this stretched blue fabric that covers all the walls. Gorgeous. Yeah. Love it. James, right? The SeaDen? James, come look at these pictures. Yes, for what fabric can look like. Yes.
Yeah. So he says it's humid in the Philippines, like all the time. His theater room has 2 windows on the right side, and he brings in a portable dehumidifier once or twice a week and lets it run inside the theater. But from time to time, he finds some little spots on his wooden columns that he believes is some mold growth. He wipes away the spots with some disinfectant, but is there a permanent solution, something that would stop this mold growth from ever happening?
So not that it makes a huge difference, but I'm guessing it's probably mildew. Which is also a fungus, just like mold is. But if it's kind of white or milky or grayish, it's probably mildew. If it's black, then it's mold.
It's mold, right.
But I'm guessing it's probably mildew, because normally when it's just like an exposed surface, warm, humid, and it's an organic surface, which the wood apparently is, it's not fake wood, then usually that's mildew that grows on that. Mold, it's normally like something is leaking. It's in a spot you don't see because mold likes dark. Mold likes the darkness. It likes damp and heat too, just like mildew does, but it likes the darkness. So usually it's kind of in a spot that gets revealed, like by a window or by a leaky pipe or something. And there you have a bunch of, mold, which is usually black or sometimes green. But if it's just like little spots of kind of white, milky grayish on wood, I'm betting it's mildew.
Yeah. I think, other than an AC upgrade or something, something like that, to me the solution is just to park a dehumidifier here with a sensor in it, and just have it live here.
That thing could be running all the time. It could get expensive. Do the windows open? Not that. If outside is actually warmer and more humid than inside, it might not help. But if you can really help. It's usually just air circulation. Interestingly, there are some plants that are actually good at regulating the temperature in a room. It's not all plants. You don't just willy-nilly put plants in there, but you can, I don't know what they are exactly, but there are some plants that are helpful in dehumidifying rooms. So you could maybe talk to a garden expert about that, or maybe some interior designers would even be able to weigh in. But that might be helpful. But yeah, it's just, there's not much you can do when the ambience is just always humid and warm. And you've got an organic material. Mildew's going to like that. You kind of have to just upgrade your entire HVAC system. Gosh, is there really anything else that can be done?
I don't think so.
Not on a permanent basis that I'm aware of.
Like I said, the dehumidifier.
Yeah.
Because in Florida, we are very humid here as well. So I feel your pain. I'm sure it's not as bad as the Philippines, but we also have very serious ACs that run all summer long. Yeah. And that's how we control things like that.
The other things is just improving the air circulation with not necessarily AC all the time, but if you can have a whole house fan installed, just the fan in your attic that just keeps the air moving in your entire house, that could be a benefit. If you could just run fans, leave the door open, leave the window open, maybe, I don't know, leaving the window open might be worse, but leave the door open and just have fans going that circulate the air around the room, because that hopefully would be cheaper than running an AC or a dehumidifier all the time. Just a fan going should be less electricity. So
if you think about it, when they do mold remediation, the first thing they do is they install a bunch of fans and try to dry everything out.
Yeah. Or they actually try to draw negative air pressure out of the room if at all possible.
So, you can listen to what we've said and maybe try some of these things. It probably would behoove you just to at least call a local HVAC or a mold remediation.
That's the real solution, yes.
And then call them and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm experiencing. How can I stop this from happening?
Yeah.
They may try to sell you a super expensive AC upgrade, or there's also that, right? He could just get an AC wall unit.
Right.
That it fits in that window, and then he has that going during the day to keep it a certain temperature to keep things from, and that would dehumidify that room as well.
Yeah.
But again, that's more cost.
Yes.
So I don't know.
Yeah. There's no getting around the electricity of running something that runs on electricity all the time.
Right.
But putting a portable dehumidifier in there once a week, that is not going to do it in the Philippines for sure. Yeah, so talk to the expert, more air circulation, and honestly, mildew, if you're seeing it and cleaning it right away, the chances of it being a health hazard is really low if it is mildew. So if you're seeing it on a surface and cleaning it right away, it's not really the end of the world. It's like getting a bit of mildew in your shower. You clean it off. There's no harm done. So, yeah.
Yeah. Jack and Chris. I think Chris has a similar question to Jack's.
Yeah, Jack's last question is similar to Chris's, so I combined them.
There we go. So Jack's theater build is coming along nicely. He'll have an acoustically transparent front wall, and he's installed 4 boxed baffle subwoofers that each use 6 drivers. He must have DIY'd this thing.
It is crazy looking. I don't know what his plans are, but okay.
Anyways, his plan is going to try to wrangle all of that with the mini DSP and the multi-sub optimizer software, so we'll see how that goes. This is akin to Infinite Baffle Sub, where once you've placed it, it's not going anywhere. So it looks like he has 3 up front.
They're all towards the front of the room. All 4 of these things. I got 3 of them basically behind where the left, center, and right will go. Behind his false wall up front, and then 1 more that's on the left side wall, but still towards the front portion.
Tell you what, that acoustically transparent screen better be tight.
There got to be some air moving.
Got some air moving through that.
I don't know how he arrived at this, but whatever. We're not even dealing with that. It's in the images people were going to ask if we didn't touch upon it.
Yeah. Those red drivers. I don't know, man. That is crazy. So as always, things have taken longer than originally hoped. Over a year ago, he bought the BenQ HT5550 projector. He had a whole plan. The projector would be mounted at the highest portion of the ceiling, just in front of the soffit that runs around the perimeter of his theater area. That would conceal the projector from view and have it out of the sight lines of the bar stools at the back of the room. The lens would go 12 feet from the screen. He's making his own acoustically transparent screen using Seymour AV Center Stage UF material. He hadn't settled on an exact screen size yet, so he finally mounted the projector using the peerless ceiling mount with the worm gears that we often recommend, and projected the image onto his front wall so that he could figure out his ideal screen size. His family preferred 110, which is a little bit smaller than he had originally thought, but he'd be fine with anything in the 110 to 120 range. The problem, the HT5550 doesn't seem to have enough lens shift. By default, the center of the lens lines up with the center of the image, but then you can use a lens shift to move the image up or down from there. But at the maximum vertical lens shift, the lens of the projector is basically right in line with the top edge of the image, maybe just a few inches higher. So he would have to physically lower the projector to get the screen where it needs to be, and he really doesn't want to do that. It's already directly above the seats, and he doesn't want the projector to be visible at all from the back of the room. The soffit is supposed to visually hide it. He'd be willing to sell off the HT5550 and get the Epson 5050 UB instead, but would that work? Is there anything else that could be done? So I'm looking at this thing right here.
Yes.
So how he's sitting, I mean, these pictures are hard to see, but he's sitting pretty far away from this, it looks like.
Well, he's sitting about 12 feet away because his seat is more or less right in line with where the projector is going to be overhead. I
mean, I don't know that he has to have it so much lower. I mean, the sight line, is the sight line going to
I mean, if you're looking at the front wall, he's got this soffit that goes all the way around the perimeter of the room. And looking at the front wall, I'm imagining the top of the screen is going to go very close to the bottom of the soffit. That's just eyeballing it, that's where I would think it would be. So that being the case, it would mean that with the BenQ HT5550, you'd essentially have to have the lens at the same height as the bottom of the soffit. That's
which
more
you
or
can't
less
do because it's above the soffit, right?
Yes. So he's got, and that's why he's like, I put it up there, it doesn't work. Now, you could tilt the projector and use keystone correction. Ew. Not in love with that idea, but it would function. I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, if the lens of the projector were basically in line with the bottom of that perimeter soffit, like, yes, from the bar stools behind, you'd be able to see, what is actually the top of the projector because it would be inverted. You'd see the top of the projector just a little below that bottom line of the soffit. It wouldn't be exactly perfect, but the HT5550 is black. So, I mean, if you've got this peerless mount already, it has the threaded insert on the top for just a 1.5-inch diameter national pipe thread. So you can just get a piece of black pipe. If it's not exactly the right length, any home hardware store can put the national pipe threading onto it. So you can make that whatever length you want. It's like $15 for a 1.5-foot length of pipe. And then you just get a little collar that attach. So instead of putting the projector mount directly onto the ceiling, you just get this little threaded mount. They've got really small ones, or ones that span 16 or 24 inches on center, or ones that are kind of circular, and you can drop the wire down through it. So I mean, you could lower this projector without it looking weird to me at all. It would be at the same height, essentially, as the bottom of the soffit. So if nobody's bumping their head on the bottom of the soffit when they're walking around this room, then they wouldn't be bumping their head on the projector overhead. It's at the same height. So I think you could do this with just a little pipe extension, and it'll cost you like $30 total. That's my number one thought on this, because I don't want to do the keystone correction.
Yeah, I don't like the keystone correction either. So the soffit, it comes down a little bit, right? But there's no reason why.
It's like over a foot. It's more than a foot down. Yeah.
So there's no reason. I mean, where your lens is, I mean, if it has to be like right at the top of that screen, you could still raise the top of your screen up enough so that it was, it will fit. Now you might be projecting just a slight, like the white part of the screen might be a slight bit on the soffit on the other wall. But
you're thinking have the screen in front of the soffit on the front wall? Oh.
Well, he's got this wall that it looks like it's flush with the front.
Yeah, the false wall's pretty close to flush. Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah, just move the screen up a little bit so that it fits. I mean, I don't think visually it's going to bother you at all. I mean, I think that whole wall is going to end up being black anyways, right?
Right.
Or something like it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it's, if you're, I mean, I just don't see how that makes much of a difference. So
we're thinking there's a way to keep the projector you have and make this work. Maybe you drop it a little bit and you raise the screen a little bit. But to answer the question as wrote, could an Epson 5050 UB work instead?
Could definitely do it.
Yes, it could. The way figuring out lens shift range is a little bit confusing. Now, thankfully, Projector Central has updated how they describe the lens shift range if you go to the projector calculator for either of these models. So they actually tell you if you set a screen size in the projector throw calculator, they tell you how many inches you've got to move the image up or down. They just tell you how many inches. So when it was just going by percentages before, the BenQ HT5550 has what they call a plus or minus 60% vertical lens shift. So that means you take the total height of your screen. If he's going 110 inches, that'd be a 54-inch height. You can take 60% of that height and move the image up or down that much. That's what the 60% plus or minus means. Now, you take, half of that screen height, 27 inches, and then add only another 10%, well, you've got, 5.4 inches extra, right? So the lens of the screen, the center of the lens, can be like 5 inches above the top of the image. That's the maximum, and that's why he was saying it's not enough if his projector is mounted right against his ceiling. The Epson 5050 UB has, I think it's almost 97% plus or minus, almost the entire height of the image, up or down. So it's still starting at the middle of the image height-wise, but then you can move it like 52 inches up or down instead of only, 27 and a little bit. So, the 5050 UB can do this. So if you've just got this plan in mind, that's all you want to do. You know exactly where you want to put the height of the screen. You know exactly where you want to mount the projector, and you're not willing to change either of those things. The Epson 5050 UB can work, and it can throw a 110 or a 110-inch, 120-inch with the lens 12 feet away. It has enough zoom range to do that too. 120 is about as big as you can go with the lens 12 feet away. You can't go a whole lot bigger, but he wasn't planning to go any bigger than that anyway.
Well, that's the other thing too. If he's like, oh, it's going to be too high, well, go 120, and then they'll make it look a little bit lower.
Right.
Just don't tell your family.
Yeah.
Do what I did with my wife when we first got married, and I'd make her food that she liked. I'd make her a dish, and she'd eat it. She goes, I really like this. And then I'd next week make the same dish again, add a little bit more spice to it. She's like, oh, this is spicy. I'm like, nope, it's the same. She's like, oh, okay. And she just eat it. Next thing she knows, we go to a hot wing place. She orders mild wings. I'm like, you don't like mild? She goes, oh, I don't eat spicy food. I'm like, yeah, you do. 5 years later, yeah, you do.
I have conditioned you gradually over time.
She was so mad when she ordered those mild wings. She's like, these don't have any flavor. I'm like, I know. It's because you eat spicy. There's a place in town called Ferg's that has the pretty good wings. It's like a sports bar place over by Tropicana Field, which is where the Rays play or whatever, or they used to. I don't know. Maybe they still do. But they have like their top one is Suicide, and the entire family eats the one just below that.
Okay. That would not be me. Actually, I like the taste, but the rest of my body can't handle it.
He says, should he consider paying a lot more than his planned budget and get a JVC projector instead, since the JVC projectors are physically quite a bit bigger? Would one of those even fit such that it would be able to throw the image that he wants? I mean, I don't know. And we don't think that you have to switch past anything. I mean, if I can see the desire to want a JVC, that's for sure.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Yeah.
It is a lot more money.
It's a lot more money.
And it is an issue. If you're going to mount the projector in front of that soffit that's at the back portion of your theater area, it actually is an issue because it is deeper than either the BenQ or the Epson, just physically. It's like 75% deeper. So it is a front to back, much bigger projector. That means the lens will necessarily be closer to your screen. Instead of 12 feet, it's now going to be like just over 11 feet, not even 11 and a half feet. And from there, it wouldn't be able to throw a 120, just no way, no how. if you really squeak everything together, it might be able to eke out the 110 that it sounds like you're going for, but it'd be close. And I would not want to pay $5,500 to find out that you can't even fill the screen that you built. So, proceed with extreme caution if you were to do this. Whereas if you do just get the 50-50, everything works out.
Jack and Chris have similar questions here. This is the last question. So, for these guys. So, once things are finally finished, would it be worth hiring a professional calibrator to calibrate the projector? He's never had a professional calibration before. On his TVs, he just sets them to cinema or ISF dark, and that seems to look pretty darn good. He isn't keen on buying a meter and software and trying to do it himself. Or should he just plug in the picture settings listed by Projector Reviews and call it a day? Or should he hire a calibrator? And if so, how does he go about picking one? Chris also wants to know if he should run his Epson 5050 UB projector for at least 100 hours before having it professionally calibrated. That is literally the first time I've ever heard anybody say those words in that order.
Really?
I have never heard that before.
That's pretty common advice of letting the lamp run for a while before having a pro calibrator. The pro calibrators will request that you do that. When it's a lamp-based projector, they do. So the lamp ages over time, of course, but there is a little bit fresh out of the box where they shift and lower in brightness much faster than the rest of their life. It's a curve that they go on there. So that does seem to be generally. I mean, honestly, if you talk to a professional calibrator and say you'd like to hire them and tell them that you're going to be getting an Epson 5050 UB calibrator, they're probably going to tell you, oh, make sure you run it at least 100 or 200 hours before I even come. So I don't think you're really going to have a lot of. Well, obviously you could lie, but I think they're going to tell you to do it anyway. So for Chris's question specifically about that, Chris also in his email asked if he should, in the meantime, before the calibrator comes in, use he was saying out of the websites, which settings should he go with? Like which one should he plugged in? Projector Reviews. I'll have the link for their review of the 5050 UB. They've got good settings. So in the meantime, plug those in. That's for sure where I would go.
But in general, is a professional calibration worth it? Now, Rob and I are probably going to disagree on this on many levels, but
possibly,
Clint has been reviewing projectors and TVs for a very, very, very long time, and he gave up calibrating them. He goes, it's just not worth it. It's not worth my time to calibrate his own projector.
Mm-hmm.
He is ISF certified, I believe. He's THX certified for sure because we took the class together. So he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's like, out of the box, you just change a couple of settings. Bob's your uncle.
I mean, it isn't 100% of all displays. The vast majority of displays that we ever recommend. So if you buy one of the displays that we recommend, this is probably going to be the case where, I mean, can it be technically, objectively improved even further than out of the box?
Absolutely.
Yes, across the board, yes. But noticeable to the human eye or without a reference display right next to it to compare head-to-head in that moment, things are really darn close now, including the Epson 5050 UB and the BenQ HT5550, if Jack decides to keep it. Projector Reviews mentions, particularly with the Epson 5050 UB, they're like, yeah, our calibrator was like, yeah, I could make this better, but out of the box, this is really darn close. Where Tom and I have disagreed in the past is I think if you've never had a professional calibration ever before, that I do think it's a good experience to go through. Particularly talk to them beforehand, get on the phone with them beforehand or email them, and make sure there's somebody who is going to actually talk with you while they do it. They might actually request more time and charge you more, but have somebody who's willing to do it, because that, honestly, that's the value. Not so much the image you end up with the end. It's the value is in, if you're interested in this stuff, it's seeing the equipment, seeing the process, having them talk you through it. That's the real value to me. And if you've never been through it before, I do think there's value there if you're interested in this stuff. It's an education more than it is the end result. And I think that's where you might want to go at it. I would point anybody and everybody in the United States to Lion AV as the place to go and ask. If they don't have a staff member themselves who works in your service area, they have resources to get you to somebody good. They are the people who train other calibrators.
Right.
So I would point anybody to Lion AV as the place to start. Get in touch with them. You will for sure end up with a really qualified calibrator. Chris wasn't asking whether or not he should. He wants to do it. He's going to do it. But he was mainly asking, in the meantime, which settings should he go for? Projector reviews. And should he do the 100 hours? And like I say, talk to Lion AV. They'll tell you to do it. So go with their advice.
Right. And the difference between Rob and I is I say you should save the $300 to $500 and just live with it.
Jack, if you did that, I've got no beef.
Yeah.
If you're like, look, I don't really care about I'm never going to buy the meter and software. He already said that. I'm not super interested in being educated on the process. I'm like, plug in those projector review settings and I think you're good to go.
Call it good. So Chris had one more question. He said on our advice, he bought a 25-foot active HDMI cable from Blue Jeans and a 15-foot passive HDMI cable from Blue Jeans as well. He's got the 25-foot active cable going from his Denon X8500HA to his Epson 5050UB, and the 15 passive cable goes from his receiver to his TCL TV. Both displays can accept 4K 60 and HDR10. He ran the HDMI cables inside conduit within his walls. He tested both cables outside the wall first, and they both function flawlessly. Okay, this. Okay. The Epson seems to work just fine no matter what, but as long as a 25-foot active cable is plugged in at both ends, the TCL TV flickers. It seems to be worse if, at the worst at least, if both the main zone and zone 2 are showing the same source. If they're showing different sources, it seems to mostly be okay. If he unplugs the 25-foot cable at either end, then the TCL is perfectly fine. He's tried swapping the cables on the receiver end so the TCL uses the main zone output and Epson uses the zone 2 HDMI output, but that didn't make any difference. Any ideas? He's at a loss. Boy, that sounds like that active cable is giving off some sort of interference, is what it sounds like.
I guess.
But I don't know.
It must be, right? What
I
else
would 100% call Blue Jeans on this.
Okay.
That's what I would do.
Okay.
I would call Blue Jeans and say, listen, I plugged them individually and I put them in the same conduit and now something's going on. They're going to be like,
yeah, because they do
we're going to get back to you.
They do have 25-foot passive cables that are still high-speed premium certified.
Right.
Not ultra-high speed, but you don't need ultra-high speed because you've got a projector. It's not HDMI 2.1. They do, so they're thick. The 25-foot ones that are certified high-speed premium, the 18 gigabits per second certified, those ones are thick, but you've got a conduit. Hopefully it's a large enough diameter conduit. Well, if it fit the HDMI plug, the rest of the cable is no thicker than the plug.
Will go through there.
So
I guess, is there anything else going through there? Or is it just the HDMI? I mean, I can't imagine what else could possibly be going through.
Well, and it's not even the 25-foot one that's the problem. It's and the 15-foot one is fine as long as the 25-foot one isn't plugged in.
Yeah.
So I mean, it sounds like he does on occasion want to use both displays at the same time. So the solution because you can with a Harmony remote or something else that lets you get to the infrared codes, you can, with a button on a programmable remote, choose whether it's main zone out or the mirrored HDMI out or zone 2. Like you can choose each of those individually. But if the problem is that whenever you're playing both displays at the same time, both showing the same source, you get this flickering, then that solution isn't going to work because that remote control solution only works if the issue was it's fine with one display or the other, but not both at the same time. Then that lets you choose which HDMI output of your Denon is active rather than just saying have both of them active all the time, because that's the default. But that doesn't seem to be a solution in Chris's case. So I agree with Tom. I think the thing to do here is get in touch with Blue Jeans, unfortunately pull that active cable through your conduit out of the wall and get them to send you a 25-foot passive HDMI
Well, I mean,
cable.
I don't necessarily say you demand that they give you a passive cable. I would, at the very least, I would give them this information. I would tell them
ask
your
them
receiver,
first.
your different, the different cables that you've bought, the model numbers of of everything.
Yeah.
So that, the TCL and the projector, and then anything else that might be in that conduit, or if there is any other conduit or cables that's running nearby. Like if you have a Romex, or a bunch of Romex going right around this conduit, right next to this conduit, that's something they might need to know as well. And then just hit them with that information and see what they say.
Sure.
I mean, this is
Like
Blue
maybe
Jeans Cable. I would be shocked if they didn't say, "Oh, here, let's do some troubleshooting, and then we're gonna make it right for you."
Right.
Because I think that's probably what they're gonna do.
Yeah. It's like it could the 15-foot passive cable. It's like it's surrounded by Romex and it's right on the edge. And when the 25-foot is active, it's just enough to tip it to where it has problems. Because, like you said, if he's using the 15-foot by itself, no problem. So
it's very strange that it's only with the same, not only, but it's primarily with the same content. That's just odd too.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. I'm at a bit of a loss too, but hopefully that answer gives you somewhere to go.
RD has a Denon X8600H receiver. It doesn't seem to list any specs about its headphone jack. There are some people online who claim that most AV receivers have crappy headphone outputs with high output resistance. Do receiver manufacturers actually cheap out on the headphone output of a $1,000 plus receiver? Are there good headphone amps such as the JDS Labs Atom for only $100? He says there are good headphone amps for $100. Would it be a good idea to get one of those? Well, step 1, plug in your headphones. Step 2, listen.
Yes. Do you, have it on, but like paused? Do you hear a noise floor?
Yeah.
Because that's the number one thing that's going to happen. So first of all, do they sometimes cheap out on the headphone output on AV receivers? Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, they do.
They do.
That is not out to lunch. They very often
because the vast majority of customers will never use it for anything whatsoever. And the ones that do use it, they're making their kids plug into it so that they can listen to Dora the Explorer or whatever. And no one cares about the audio quality there.
Right.
Very, very small subset of people look at their AV receiver and says, I can't wait to use that headphone jack with my high-end headphones.
Now, interestingly, if it does have a high output resistance, and sometimes it does, because sometimes they're actually using the same amplifiers as drive the speakers, but they just throw a resistor inline in there, and you do end up with a high output resistance. Interestingly, you will have less of an issue if you're driving like 300 or 600 ohm headphones, if the output resistance of the headphone jack is high, and then the input resistance of the headphones is also high. You will have less of an issue there. It's when you use a not so great headphone output of an AV receiver with some like 16 ohm in-ear monitors. You do that and you'll hear the noise floor. That's the telltale sign is the noise floor. You'll hear the noise floor. So I don't know what headphones you're using, RD. Plug them in to your Denon AV receiver. If the music is on pause and you're listening to it and you're like, it's a dead silent noise floor. I don't hear anything. There's no hiss, there's no hiss, there's no hum, there's nothing going on. Then you're fine. Even if it is a cheap headphone output, it doesn't matter.
Tell you what, the internet loves to speak in absolutes.
Right.
They just love it. And if one headphone jack was bad, they assume that they're all bad. So this is a very easy test. Just sit your butt down next to your receiver, plug in, and listen to it. And you can turn the volume up too.
Yeah.
I mean, test it and then see. You're like, okay, well, if I turn the volume up to reference, I hear a noise floor. Okay, well, turn it back down, press play, and then see how loud you actually like it. And then turn, press pause again and see if you hear a noise floor there.
Right.
I mean, it's quite easy.
It is not out of the question that you will do this test and you're like, yeah, there is a noise floor there. It's as bad as when I plug into my computer. Not out of the question at all.
Yes.
And if that's the case, then yeah, $100, I love that JDS Labs Atom. I think it's a fantastic little headphone app. And yeah, $100, by all means, you can throw it onto the pre-outs and there you go.
Yeah. THX just released a USB outboard DAC thingy, which will probably work well too. But again, that was more of a computer solution than this. But there's lots of them that are out there. I think Emotiva has like a standalone DAC that you could plug in. There's all sorts of things. You can spend some money on this, is what I'm saying. But that $100,
you don't have to.
Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, 99% of why I think you should buy a headphone DAC is because of the lower noise floor and the higher amplification.
Right.
Everything else is like, oh, well, it's got the best DACs in it. It doesn't matter. Oh, it's got
Can it do 16-bit 44.1? As long as it can do that, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
maybe 16-bit 48, because a lot of signals are 48. So
This comes from Anonymous. Anonymous has owned an Epson 7350 projector for a long time now. That's an XGA resolution, 1024 by 768 LCD model with 1600 lumens from 1999. And he's partying like it is that year. What can they expect picture quality-wise if they upgrade to, say, an Epson 5050 UB? In theory, they understand the 4K resolution HDR should look better, but do those specs actually translate to real, highly noticeable differences? I bet black levels is going to be a big thing for you too there, buddy.
Yes.
I'll be honest with you.
And
I'd say that contrast is going to be like what you're really going to notice. You're going to be like, okay, I'll be honest with you. I switched from a BenQ to an Epson and was like, oh, I don't really notice that much of a difference. And then my Epson, something happened to the Epson, so I took it down and put the BenQ in there. I went, nothing is black.
Yeah. Well, and especially going to one of the UB, the ultra black models. Yeah, unquestionably the black levels, the contrast, the colors too, because that 73 the 7350 was more or less a business class projector.
Right.
It could get plenty bright, no problems with that, but you'll notice the black, the contrast, the colors. Also, what you have is a 4:3 aspect ratio projector, so you've got 1024 by 768, it's a 4:3 aspect ratio. So you've got black bars going on all the time for the majority. I would imagine most of what you're watching is 16:9. So pure resolution wise, depends on how far away you sit. Will you really notice the bump in resolution? That's probably the last thing you'll notice is the bump in resolution. But you might. You're with the projector you have, you're at the point where it is possible going from 768 to pseudo 4K, because it's a 1080.
Again, it's one of those times when you change too many things at the same time. You're
Indeed.
not going to know.
The
black levels, the wider color gamut, the HDR, the higher resolution. What's the thing you're going to notice?
Yeah.
It's better.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to notice.
Yes.
This is one where you're like, this is a far enough jump in technology that you're going to be like, ooh.
Yeah, I'm assuming the worry here is I spend the money, I get a 5050 UB, I get it, I go, okay, it's better, but only a little bit. I don't predict that. I think you will go, yep, you know what? I waited 22 years and it was worth it.
All right, Andrew.
Oh, we didn't answer the second question from Anonymous.
Okay, I scrolled down to see what else is there. Okay, who are we with then?
Still with Anonymous, yeah.
He says, we've been saying how it's a bad time to buy a new AV receiver right now, but it seems like that's mostly because of all the HDMI 2.1 problems. Realistically, isn't HDMI 2.1 mostly for gaming? And if you're not a gamer at all, should you still wait on buying a receiver right now? In your case, because you have a projector and you're planning on sticking with the projector, you can buy a receiver. That's fine.
If you can still find one, you could get a 2019 model that didn't have HDMI 2.1 of any flavor. That would be fine.
In your case, yes. So, but when we talk about that, we're talking about people wanting to future-proof, at least somewhat. Like I'm not one to really worry, especially receivers, to worry that much about future-proofing, because 2 years from now, that's going to be obsolete. I mean, on some level, it's 2 years from now, it's going to be obsolete. So why really care that much? But don't immediately buy something that's already obsolete. And that's where we are right now. Everything is obsolete, or they have promised to fix it but haven't done it yet.
Right. I mean, particularly, we got someone who's saying, I'm getting an OLED and I'm getting a new AV receiver, and it's like, we're assuming Denon and Marantz are going to announce their new models pretty soon. Yamaha already did. Will any of them be a good HDMI 2.1 situation? As long as Yamaha's promised firmware update does come, then yes, it should be good. Will Denon and Marantz have more than one HDMI 2.1 input? God, I hope so. If those things,
I'm very much afraid that they're not.
I know,
or there'll be two. And I'll be like, oh, you guys are killing me.
Well, even that. But if those things turn out to be true, then we'll be saying, it really would have been best to just wait. Even in this situation where you're planning, okay, I'm going to have a projector, I'm not a gamer, it's the situation of, if you wait 3 months and you get a receiver that potentially will last you that much longer, there's that. But
yeah, Mr. 22 years between upgrades and projectors. Are you
Mr.
really
or Mrs.
Gonna,
we don't know. This is anonymous.
Oh, this is anonymous. Sorry.
But
sorry. What's the same anonymous? Yeah, he waited 22 years.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Sorry. So I mean, in this scenario, not a gamer, going with a projector, then it is perfectly fine to get a receiver that is HDMI 2.0 only, and there won't be any issues there. You're not going to have to worry about 4K 120 in that situation.
Right. Andrew, again, first time for everything. Most speakers list a recommended power rating. For example, as KEF LS50s recommend 25 to 100 watt input. What happens if you use a 200 watts per channel amp? He's assuming having more power available won't hurt the speakers, but is there any benefit? More headroom, less chance of clipping, maybe the amp will run cooler. it's really, it's just, there's just no benefit. I mean, it's not no benefit. You don't want to have an underpowered amplifier section for your speakers. Does it do any good to have more amplifier power available than you'll ever use? Not sonically, but but I mean, it does mean that if there's ever a case where you're trying to really blow get these speakers as loud as possible, and it asks for a huge draw from the amplifier, it will be available and it won't clip. You may break the speaker anyways.
You might still melt a voice coil.
But it won't be because the amplifier clipped.
Right.
So I guess there's the benefit, but
on a ongoing day-to-day basis, will you hear a benefit?
Yeah,
no,
they will never hear it.
It's not that type of benefit. Having the 200 watts instead of 100 watts is no detriment. There is no downside from a performance standpoint. Half
the time, it's like when you buy a subwoofer, right? You want a subwoofer that can play low, it can play loud, and it can fill your room with bass, right? So you want to make sure that you're getting a subwoofer that fills your space, and then you want it to hit a certain low point. Well, one of those things is going to be the limiting factor, right? So you're like, oh, I want to be able to get down to 20 hertz. Well, fine, you want to be able to get down to 20 hertz. Like every sub at SVS can now do that.
Sure.
At least. So that one's not the limiting factor. The limiting factor is how big your room is, because the size of your room is going to get you to the other place. And I think the same thing happens here too. Like, I want an amplifier that has a certain number of channels. Well, you're already gotten there anyways.
Pretty much, yeah. Will it run cooler? That's more to do with the design of the amp than the wattage rating. The wattage rating isn't going to have anything much to do with that.
And when your receiver is running hot, it's not the amplifier section that's doing it anyways. It's a video processing or something else that's going on in there. There's a lot of reasons that things run hot, and it's not necessarily just because of the amps.
There are some 500-watt amplifiers out there connected to 50-watt speakers, and they run real hot. And then there's some 50-watt amplifiers connected to 100-watt, rated input speakers, and they're cool as a cucumber. So, it's more the design than the wattage rating.
Yeah. So he's only 8 feet away from his LS50s. He knows he doesn't need an external amp. That's fine. He simply wants to have one anyways. He's considering either the Monopress Monolith 3X. I guess it's
the 3-channel one. Yeah.
3-channel one, okay. 200 watts per channel into 8 ohms, or the Emotiva XPA3 Gen 3, which is 275 watts into 8 ohms. Would those extra 75 watts per channel in the Emotiva make any difference? No.
Not a whit. Nothing whatsoever. Now, thankfully, both of these have excellent signal-to-noise ratio. Both of them have low noise floor. There will be no audible difference for you to discern 8 feet away from 3 LS50s driven by either of these. There also won't be any difference in what you hear just having driven them off of your AV receiver from 8 feet away.
You should hear, this is literally buying flashing lights for the front of your room.
Indeed.
This is what this is. This is a pretty box with a blue light in it.
Do you?
And I assume that you could just buy a pretty box with a blue light in it that didn't do anything, and it would still sound the same as what you're planning on buying. But that being said, it's your money. You go with God.
I will say that. Do you like the looks of one of them better? Do you prefer the looks of the Monolith or the looks of the Emotiva XPA3? Choose based on that, or barring that, get whichever one is cheaper at the time that you're buying, because there is
cheaper, how they look, the size of where you're going to put it. Make sure it fits into your rack or onto your shelf or whatever. I don't know. Flip a coin.
Right. Something. If one of them had a worse noise floor than the other, that to me would decide it. But
that would be the decision.
In this instance, they're both excellent. So there's no reason to go with get whatever's cheaper or the one you like the looks of better.
All right, I know we're pushing up on 2 hours here, but let's finish Bertrand.
Sure, I'm fine with it.
I know, but my kids are going to be coming home pretty soon, and they're going to.
Well, if you want to stop, I'm okay too.
Bertrand in Quebec.
Yes.
Quebec, whatever. Bertrand has a 5.2.4 configuration. It's an enclosed room that's about 12 by 14. Martin Logan motion speakers all around with dual SVS SB1000 Pro subs, more or less in diagonally opposite corners. It's a bit of good news, despite how awful things got with the online retailer Electronics for Less. He did actually receive a replacement Panasonic UB820 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and it seems to be reading discs just fine. So that got all worked out.
Yes, I was very happy to hear that. At least a little bit of good news on that front. So that's nice.
Yeah. He's played several Ultra HD Blu-rays. They do sound pretty darn good, particularly if he turns his system up to full reference volume. That's when the bass sounds best. But he continues to be a little dissatisfied with his center speaker. His front, left, and right surrounds really seem to sound better, so he asks, if he's watching with someone else, he'll continue to use the center speaker because you can really tell that the dialogue isn't centered if you sit anywhere other than the middle seat. The room is small and the seats are close, so that seems unavoidable. But when he's watching alone, would it make sense to just use a phantom center? His receiver is a Marantz SR8015, so he could just set up two different. So could he just set up two different Odyssey presets, one with the center active, one with it turned off? Would that allow him to change quickly and easily? That is not as quickly and easily as just going into the speaker settings and turning off your center speaker. The uploading Odyssey takes like 15 minutes.
But
I would.
Well. So two things. So first of all, he's got an SR8015. That is the current 2020 flagship, which does let you set two presets. So he can do this thing. Now, what you will have to do is you will go into the setup. You could do this through the setup wizard, or you can do it manually, but you'll go into the amplifier assign, into the speaker setup. In one of the speaker setups, you'll say, yes, I have a center channel or a center speaker. In the second one, you'll say, no, I don't. You will have to run Odyssey twice.
Right.
There's no way around that. You have to say, okay, I'm setting up preset 1, and now I'm setting up preset 2. One of them has the center speaker, one of them doesn't. But you can do it, and once the two presets are done and memorized, it is a button press on the remote to switch between preset 1 and preset 2, and it is fast and easy, and you can do it. Now, what Tom was mentioning of just going into the speaker settings, let's say you have a receiver, an older Denon Marantz that doesn't have the two presets because they only added that feature in 2020. If you went in there and just turned your center speaker off, that would deactivate Odyssey room correction, because Odyssey can't be active unless you're using the speaker configuration that was set when you ran Odyssey. So you could do it, it would turn Odyssey correction off. If you go in there and say, I don't have a center speaker anymore. Yes.
I kind of felt like it shouldn't do that.
Ideally, it wouldn't. It would just keep correcting the others as it is, but it doesn't. If you change the amplifier assign, the speaker configuration, if you change that in any way, it turns Odyssey off.
Oh, that's
but
stupid.
In his case, with an SR8015 from 2020, he's got the two presets available. So you can do this, and it's very fast and easy to switch.
Oh. For everybody else, it's not.
Indeed.
So far, he has stuck to playing 5.1 and 5.1 and Atmos. He hasn't tried any upmixing at all just yet. So what is the best way to test the upmixing just step-by-step wise? How do you actually use the upmixing? I just went to AV Gadgets. I wrote an article about this last week. I haven't published it yet.
Okay.
So on Denon or Marantz, it's very easy. You've got the game, music.
Yeah, movie, music, game,
music,
pure.
yeah.
There are 4 buttons on your remote that are under the listening mode section. It's movie, music, game, pure. 4 of them.
So when you're listening or watching something, when some content is being played, you press the game. You could press music or movie, but you're going to press the game button, and this will bring a menu up on your screen. The top menu will be essentially whatever is coming in. That's what it'll be. So if you're listening to 5.1, it'll say 5.1 at the top. If it's 2.0, it'll say 2.0 or stereo at the top.
Stereo, yeah.
Okay.
And it'll say, like, if it's Dolby Digital from a DVD, it'll say Dolby Digital. If it's Dolby Digital Plus, say from a streaming service, Netflix, it'll say Dolby Digital Plus as the first option on the menu that shows up on the screen.
Whatever is the
True HD.
The direct in.
Yes.
Then if you want to do upmixing, all the upmixing options are below. The 2 you care about are DTS-X and Dolby Surround.
Well, Dolby Surround and DTS Neural X.
Oh, Neural X. Sorry. Yeah, I forgot.
Just to be clear.
Yeah. So you're going to choose, you can test both of those. There's other ones down there like Virtualizer or Virtual something.
Forget all else. The only
everything else is garbage.
He'll have the Oro options too.
Oh, that's right. I forgot
in his setup.
He'll
have
all your Oro speakers you don't have. Try the 2, the DTS Neural X and the Dolby Surround. Those are the 2 up mixers, and then they will try to use all your speakers for all your content.
Yeah.
Otherwise, when Atmos comes in, you have to do that for each input and each type of content. So
each type of signal. Yeah.
Yeah, if you have a stereo signal coming in, you want it to be upmixed, you need to turn it on for upmixing. Once you have, every time you get stereo from that point on, it will upmix it. 5.1, 7.1, it's all the same. For each time you get it for the very first time, you need to choose to upmix it.
Yeah, it'll
and
remember where you left it. Yeah.
For that input.
For that type of signal. So if it's Dolby Digital 5.1 from a DVD, and you press the game button under listening modes, and you get, let's say you settle on, I like Dolby Digital 5.1 plus DTS Neural X. That's my favorite. Then the next time you get Dolby Digital 5.1, it'll be Dolby Digital 5.1 plus DTS Neural X. But then let's say you have a DTS signal coming in from a Blu-ray, DTS HD Master Audio, right? DTS HD Master Audio coming in from a Blu-ray, and you say, okay, I actually for some reason prefer DTS HD Master Audio plus Dolby Surround upmixing. Right. Then the next time DTS HD Master Audio comes in, it'll remember that, and it'll be DTS HD Master Audio plus Dolby Surround. Now, in all of this, rewind a little bit, because the whole time we've been saying press the game button, right? We said there's 4 buttons: movie, music, game, and pure. Why on earth are we saying press the game button? Because it would seem like, don't I use that for games? This has been our experience, all right? When you press the movie button and you use any of the upmixers, well, the 2 upmixers, Dolby Surround or DTS Neural X, under the movie version of those upmixers, they put in a little bit of reverb into the surround and the overhead channels. What they're trying to do is make your room sound bigger. They're trying to make it sound like a full-size cinema. So they put a little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay into the surround and overhead channels to try and trick your brain into thinking your room is bigger. If you do it under the music button version and you go to Dolby Surround or DTS Neural X, that tries to spread any of the sounds that are in your front speakers. It tries to spread it across all 3 of your front speakers, your left, center, and right. So if something that's supposed to be locked in the center speaker, it'll actually spread some of that sound into the left and right main speakers as well. I'm not totally sure why it does that. There's actually the center spread setting in the audio section of your setup menus that lets you choose how much it spreads the sound. That only applies to the music version of the upmixers. Tom and I like the game version the best because the game version tries to put sounds into individual speakers. It tries to make each of the sounds as discrete as possible and without any reverb or delay. It's just like, here's where the sound is coming from in the mix. I'm going to put it into the speaker that's closest to that location, or if it's right in between 2 speaker locations, it'll put them equally into the speakers on either side of that location to discreetly position the sound. In our experience, it sounds the best. That's a subjective thing, though. You can, by all means, try the movie version, the music version, and the game version. And just if you like one of them better, well, I mean, the pure only, so if you activate pure, it'll turn off bass management and Odyssey, and it won't upmix. The only option under the pure button that does apply upmixing is auto, but auto doesn't give you any choice. Auto will say, if this is a Dolby signal of any kind, I'm going to put the Dolby Surround upmixer on it. If this is a DTS signal of any kind, I'm going to put the DTS Neural X upmixer on it, and you can't cross-pollinate under the auto version. So our recommendation is use game, and I mean, is there a methodical way to choose it? Hey, just listen to content and try it. There's nothing else you can really do on that front, but that's how we would come at it.
Okay. Well, that's the end of questions for this week.
It is. We completed the list. Hooray.
I thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 126 patrons over at patreon.com, including Bertrand.
Yes, indeed. Patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, thanks very much to our 126 patrons there. Bertrand, thank you so much for being one of them.
Also want to thank Carl and Brandon for helping Gurinder out with his JVC problems. Preston for talking us up to HSU. And also creating a drinking game. Jack, who mentioned us to Outlaw, Accessories for Less, B&H, and Herb over at Cross Spectrum Labs.
Yeah.
and Jack for sending me photos to use on AV gadgets.
Indeed, yeah. Carl and Brandon, thanks very much for the help. Really do appreciate people coming in and helping fellow AVRant listeners for something that Tom and I didn't have the personal experience with, so that is really nice to see, and hopefully Gurinder can get that JVC noise fixed now that we know and have it confirmed. Preston, thanks for talking us up to HSU and Mini DSP, and Jack, thanks for talking us up to Outlaw, Accessories for Less, BNH, and Cross Spectrum Labs. Jack, also thank you for sending in those photos and giving permission.
Okay, I missed the Mini DSP. And lastly, we got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during the pandemic. Jason, Lance, Preston, Chris, Bertrand, Jonathan, Michael, and different Chris. So thank you to all of you as well.
Yes, so nice. I'll say it twice. Jason, Lance, Preston, Chris, Bertrand, Jonathan, Michael, and Chris. Thank you very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. Really do appreciate it. Thank you so much to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
That's right. I want everybody to go over to avrant.com, find the podcast notes, and click on the link to Rob's niece's hand-drawn animation channel and subscribe. You don't have to watch anything, though it won't take you much time to go through her entire library. But
she has a whole bunch of Roblox videos on there, too. I mean, by all means, if you're interested, have a gander, but the things she's working on herself and putting together are the hand-drawn animations. There's 2 of them so far as we're saying this today. Yeah.
All right. If you want to get your questions answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us your questions to question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.